Chapter 746. How is the selection this time? Temple on Utopia Mountain. Dean was drawing the blueprint of the giant Mercury crossbow while asking Noyce about the matter. Master, according to your instructions, we have selected the top 50 assassins on the list. The military and the parliament have also sent 20 masters who are good at lurking. They can sneak into the inner wall at any time and form a new intelligence network. Noyce stood at the bottom of the stairs and said in a sincere manner. Dean nodded slightly. He turned his finger and drew the last stroke. He put down the pen. Are you ready? They are on standby. All right. Dean nodded. Tell them to go to the inner wall immediately and use the new route to sneak in. Also prepare 3 portions of high-level undead powder for them every day. Tell them to be careful on the road. I have prepared it for them. Go. Noyce cupped his hands and left the temple. Half an hour later, he arrived at a church-like hall outside Mount Wutua. There were 70 figures with different temperaments standing in the hall. Although there were a lot of people, the hall was very quiet, and there was only silence. Noyce stood on the steps and looked at everyone. Have you memorized the mission? Yes. Everyone replied in unison. Noyce was satisfied. He took out 3 drawings from his handbag and handed them to the 3 people in front. This is the route to the inner wall and the route you will take to sneak in. The chairman has ordered us to set off immediately. The 3 of them took the drawings and nodded. With the 3 of them in the lead, everyone left through the back door in an orderly manner. In the blink of an eye, the hall that held 70 people was emptied. Noyce looked at their backs and sighed. I hope you can come back alive. 70 people left the lobby and went along the street. They were wearing the Holy Church's medals. Passers-by didn't dare to block their way. They went all the way out of the town and came to the bottom of the giant wall. There were 10 people stationed there. They were looking at 2 iron chains that were hanging down from the giant wall. 70 people came to the top of the giant wall. They followed the ropes and climbed to the top of the giant wall. It was the first time for all of them to come to the top of the giant wall. They stood at a height of 1 kilometer and looked down at the ground. They found that the people on the ground were so small and insignificant. The scenery is so beautiful from a high place. Look, there's a monster hunting over there. I see it. Although the 70 people were disciplined, but they were excited at the moment. Don't waste time. Remember your mission. Stay here and wait. The rest of you follow us down. The 3 people who had received the drawings from Noyce said. They climbed down the rope on the outside of the wall and climbed directly to the hunting area outside the giant wall. Climbing down from a height of 1,000 meters undoubtedly required a higher level of mental fortitude. Although many people were frightened, they had no choice but to obey the order. After everyone climbed out of the giant wall, they followed the lead of the 3 people and moved forward along the giant wall. After walking for more than 10 miles, they once again saw 2 iron chains hanging down from the giant wall. There were 2 people hiding in the grass and soil here. After verifying the warrant with them, they watched them climb up the giant wall along the iron chains. The new route was very simple. First, they would climb out of the giant wall, and then they would go around the wall. They would wait until they reached the giant wall area of the inner wall, and then they would climb over it. After they successfully sneaked into the giant wall, there was a wasteland in front of them. They smeared the powder on their bodies and dispersed into small teams. They ran along the wasteland at a very fast speed, like ants exploring the way. When a line of sight was raised, their extremely fast-running figures became indiscernible on the ground. At the end of the wilderness in front of them, a towering city stood on the ground. A purple thornflower flag was stuck on the city gate. This was the city under the protection of one of the 12 earls, the Earl of Redbud. The city was bustling with people on the streets. There were fortresses and high walls near the 4 entrances of the city wall. It was heavily guarded. At the moment, it was broad daylight, and all 4 gates were open. From time to time, there would be undeads wandering outside the city, but they would be shot down by the soldiers on the gate. A group of ragged pedestrians lined up at the gate waiting to enter. Stop! 10 silver coins for the entrance fee. The soldiers guarding the city shouted at the pedestrians with swords in their hands. Sir, we have no money. No money? Get out. I beg you, let us go in. I have been hungry for 5 days. I beg you, get out. Don't touch me with your dirty hands, or I will cut off your hands." The soldiers guarding the city roughly picked up a few dusty refugees from the group and threw them to the side. They pointed their swords at them, causing them to tremble in fear. Someone at the back couldn't stand it and shouted, "Didn't it cost 10 copper coins to enter the city in the past? Why does it cost 10 silver coins now? How can there be such a high entrance fee? I will report you to the magistrate." "Report? You go, but you have to pay first before you can enter the city. If you don't have money, then get out." "You, what you? 10 copper coins is not wrong. Look at the situation now. 10 silver coins is considered light. If you can't even take out 10 silver coins, why are you still alive?" The guard's attitude was rude and unreasonable. They stared at the dissatisfied people. The others who wanted to speak immediately shut up. They didn't dare to open their mouths and cause trouble for themselves. A few of them paid and were immediately let go by the guards. But they were only allowed to enter the city gate. There was a checkpoint behind the gate. Every pedestrian who entered the city would be taken to a tent to check their body. "Sir, I only have 8 silver coins. I have money. I have a lot of money. It's just that I was in a hurry to escape and didn't bring that much with me. When the army quells the corpses, I will give you 10 gold coins. What do you think?" 8. The guards thought for a while and said, "You can sign an I. Thank you. Thank you." At the back of the line, there were 9 people with unique temperament. There was a hint of impatience in their eyes. "Big brother, I didn't think that the God Wall is not only barren, but also so chaotic. I really don't know how the Wall Lord manages it. It's simply funny. I think we should directly go in. They can't even deal with a small corpse. I really don't know what kind of people are raised here. I don't know. This is the first time I know that corpses can break out inside the giant wall. I really don't know what is the use of the God Wall. You guys keep your voice down. It's our turn." Soon, it was the turn of the 9 people. The guards looked at the hunchbacked old man in the lead and saw a 3-meter-long saber on his back. The arrogant look in their eyes softened a little, and they said, 10 silver coins to enter the city." The crooked old man didn't say a word. He took out a golden bill from his bosom and handed it to the guard. "This is the entrance fee for the 9 of us. Keep the change." When the guard saw this, his eyes lit up, and he immediately put it away. He said with a smile, "Please." 9 people immediately entered the city. The old man handed out another 2 golden bills. "Let me enter the city." The inspecting officer immediately understood. With a smile on his face, he waived the strip inspection and allowed the 9 of them to enter the city. Fortunately, Old 9 killed the officer on the way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have money to enter the city. "Big brother, we can directly climb over the wall. It's so troublesome." One of the burly men muttered as they walked on the streets of the city. The crooked old man didn't turn his head. "What's the hurry? It took us half a year to get here. Do we need more time?" "It's not a matter of time. It's troublesome," the burly man corrected. Chapter 747. Big brother, you are always so cautious. Let's catch a pioneer and ask him. We should know. It's not that simple. Ordinary pioneers may not know where the corpse of the Sylvia War Immortal is hidden. In our place, it's a top secret. Big brother's plan is the most thorough. If we expose our identity in advance, and the people here know of our existence, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be a war. Although we're not afraid, if they know that we're from another place, they'll probably guess our purpose and destroy the Immortal's corpse. They dare. Why wouldn't they dare? A life and death struggle, daring to do anything. The hunchbacked old man indifferently said, "This is only one of the reasons. The second reason is that we can take this opportunity to explore the situation of this divine wall and the process of its development. Such an opportunity is hard to come by. Don't you want to see what secrets are hidden in other divine walls?" Hearing his words, the others looked at each other and immediately knew what he was planning. Immediately, all of them fell silent. Military headquarters of the inner wall. "Hero, we have lost contact with Ronan in the outer wall. Her Highness Hathaway joined forces with the Scorpion God of War and the monastery's elder Hagio, as well as other 9 pioneers to the outer wall. They said that they were chasing the undead, but it was just an excuse to attack the outer wall. But what was the result? Only Hathaway managed to escape. I heard from informants of the Dragon Clan that Hathaway's injuries were not light. The power of the Second Awakening was sealed. There were hundreds of guards surrounding the huge conference room. There was a long table in the middle of the room. An old man in his 60s with 5 gold stars on his belt said in a cold voice, "It doesn't matter who is trying to occupy the outer wall. It is a blatant provocation. Although the monastery and the Dragon Clan are involved in this, but the most shameful one is the military. We have lost 3 military gods in the outer wall." "Old Roger, don't worry. Sit down and talk." Another 5-star general persuaded. "How can I not worry?" Robert angrily said, "How can we explain to His Majesty if he comes back and sees the situation? What face do we have to see His Majesty? His Majesty has only been in the Divine Nations for a few years. He won't be back so soon." The previous 5-star general persuaded. "The monastery will be blamed even if he comes back. After all, they have been in charge of the outer wall. Everything is under their eyes. They don't know when such a dangerous person appeared. They will be the first to be punished by His Majesty. Yes, our main responsibility is to maintain the security of the inner wall. The monastery is responsible for the outer wall. In the past, when the outer wall was peaceful, didn't they use the outer wall to please His Majesty? At that time, why didn't they think of saving our military some face? Instead, He was mocking them to the extreme. Now that the outer wall has fallen into the hands of others, they come to us for help? What a joke." Another middle-aged general sneered. "I didn't approve of inviting Hero and Ronan, the 2 god of war, to help out. Now that something has happened, Sai." Another white-haired old man who looked to be in his 80s sighed with a look of pity. "Even if we don't make a move, the Dragon Tribe and the Mystic Sect will make a move sooner or later. This time, Her Highness Hathaway of the Dragon Tribe is seriously injured. I don't believe the Dragon Tribe can swallow this. I heard that the people of the outer wall are supported by Her Highness Aisha. Aisha is a cruel person. Do you remember what happened 6 years ago? Wing's clan invaded the Dragon Clan's territory. Aisha killed 5 pioneers of the Wings clan without any hesitation. She killed the younger brother of the leader of the Wings clan's saint on the spot. That's terrible." The faces of the generals on both sides of the long table changed as they heard this. "In that case, we can ask Her Highness Eureka to send the dragon race to solve this problem. We can't let the tumor of the outer wall continue to spread," Robert said. The general who was sitting next to him looked at him. "Old Robert, Her Highness Eureka won't listen to us. This matter is too complicated. The corpses in the inner wall haven't subsided yet. We have to ask the 3 marshals to take action. But the outer wall is Aisha's lair. There must be many traps laid there. Even if the 3 marshals go personally, they may not be able to retreat. What if something happens to them? Even if His Majesty rewards us for our meritorious service, do you think He will reward us as marshals? Yes. Even if we make a contribution and attack the monastery, but the price we have to pay is too high. Unless the Mystic Sect is willing to send another 3 elders, the Dragon Matriarch of the Dragon Clan, or their clan leader, it will be too difficult for the military to handle this matter alone. We are counting on them to take action, and they are also counting on us to take action." Robert said angrily, "We are pushing the responsibility to each other so that the rebellion in the outer wall hasn't subsided yet. We can only watch as the people who occupy the outer wall grow stronger and stronger. In case they completely rule the outer wall and unite all the people in the outer wall to start a war, then we will have to sacrifice too many people. There's nothing we can do about it." Which word doesn't involve sacrifices? Another general said indifferently, "We have asked Hero and Ronan last time. We thought we could recover the corpses, but who knew that they wouldn't come back? We have tried our best. Don't forget that our task is to maintain the security of the inner wall. The most important thing is to pacify the corpses as soon as possible." That's right. The corpses have spread to such a large area. Those guys from the monastery are still laughing at us. You see, 9 out of 10 pioneers' corpses were killed by the military. The Dragon Clan, Wing Clan, and Rock Clan also contributed. As for the monastery, Although they sent a lot of people, they couldn't even kill a single pioneer corpse. Of course, they didn't lose a single person. Do they expect us to help them solve the rebellion in the outer wall with such an attitude? At that time, if His Majesty really wants to punish them, he will only investigate the Dragon Clan and them. Robert clenched his fists in anger as he looked at everyone pushing the responsibility. He finally left with an angry snort. A few days passed. There was a magnificent city in the central zone of the inner wall. It also had a very beautiful name, but all the people who lived here liked to call it King's City. This was the city where the Lord of the Inner Wall lived. It was the richest, safest, and most beautiful city in the inner wall. The residents who were born here were incomparably proud of themselves. They had a sense of superiority when they go to other cities. Even the ordinary civilians here would hold their heads high like nobles in other cities. The sun shone on the city walls. The soldiers stood straight like javelins. The quality of the soldiers was obviously higher than the soldiers of other cities. Chapter 748. This is their royal city. I didn't expect their goddess body to be hidden here. How stupid. Squeak, 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 we can finally kill. The 9 people stood on the city wall, looking down at the bustling scene in the city. They were all excited. Who are you? Who are you? Seeing the 9 people suddenly jump up, the surrounding soldiers shouted angrily and rushed over. A burly man standing on the far right glanced at them and raised his hand to pull out the large blade on his back. The blade was completely black, and the back of the blade was like a shark's fin with spikes protruding out. He stabbed the blade into the ground under his feet, and the sturdy wall immediately split open. He flipped the gravel on the ground with a backhand and swung the blade. Swoosh! Swoosh! Crushed stones shot out like arrows, killing the soldiers who rushed over on the spot. Bloody holes the size of thumbs appeared on their bodies. To the royal palace. The hunchbacked old man's eyes were cold. He jumped off the city wall and dashed along the street. The passers-by didn't have time to dodge and were thrown around like sandbags, dying on the spot. As he killed, a trace of bloodthirsty killing intent appeared in his cold eyes. The other 8 people immediately followed. They turned into 9 black shadows and dashed on the street. Quick, report to the royal palace. There's an enemy attack. Report to the general. It was chaos on the city wall. Someone reacted quickly and released the emergency black pigeons in the birdcage. Report? Among the 9 people, a handsome young man with shoulder-length hair glanced at the sky above his head. He raised his head slightly and puffed up his mouth. The next moment, he spat out a mouthful of transparent liquid. It looked like saliva, but its speed was extremely fast. It was like a water arrow. With a swoosh, it hit the flying black pigeon in the sky. This black pigeon was the fastest and the most agile of all the messengers. But at this moment, it was as if it had taken the initiative to collide with the water arrow. In an instant, it was hit, and a few feathers fell off. In the next moment, it fell vertically from the sky, spraying blood. Brother, after we get the immortal's body, can I kill all these people? While the 9 people were running, a short man with wrinkled skin and an ugly face said gloomily. He licked his lips and looked at the passers-by in front of him. His throat moved slightly as if he couldn't control the excitement and killing intent in his body. As long as you get the god's corpse, you can do whatever you want, the hunchbacked elder said calmly. The 9 of them moved forward in a straight line. There were buildings in front of them, so they leaped onto them. The entire complex of buildings in the royal city seemed like a flat wasteland in front of them. They rushed to the royal palace as fast as they could. They did not sneak around, because they believed that the speed of sending messages was far slower than their speed of traveling. There are 2 military commanders in King's City, both of whom are experts from the inner wilderness. There's also a grand preceptor in the palace, who is also an expert from the inner wilderness. There are 3 of them in total. What a weak defense. The power in this divine wall can't compare to ours at all. It's too peaceful. The inner wall has such a large area, but there are so few people living in it. Some of them are squeezed to the outer wall. It's really stupid to build a side wall. the 9 of them were like 9 blurred shadows. They crossed the distance of 1 kilometer in the blink of an eye. They were able to move at such a high speed. They were able to talk and chat casually. At the same time that they invaded, the alarm on the city walls rang. The guard stationed in the middle of the city received the alarm from outside the city and immediately sounded the alarm. However, by the time their alarm sounded, the 9 people had already crossed their defense line. "Get out of here! Die!" The carriage and passers-by that were blocking their way were overturned. Some of them even jumped over their heads. "Miss, are you okay? Someone is coming. Miss is injured. Ah, my leg is broken. Help! Help me!" Cries of grief echoed as the 9 of them passed by. This wail fell into the ears of the 9 people. The person with the shrill voice, who liked to shake his shoulders like a mouse, listened with an intoxicated expression. He squinted his eyes and smiled. The 9 of them arrived in front of the palace after a moment. The square in front of the royal palace was extremely wide, and the view was broadened. The steps of the royal palace were more than 1,000 levels high, and it was like a heavenly palace. It was extremely luxurious, and there were countless female servants standing guard on steps. The scene was solemn and dignified, and ordinary commoners did not dare to approach. Even the arrogant nobles couldn't help but sigh in admiration when they came here. The figures of the 9 people paused for a moment and looked up at the magnificent palace. Even though they were experienced and knowledgeable, they still felt a trace of amazement. However, the main reason for this amazement was that they didn't expect that such a barren and backward place like the God Wall would be able to build such a magnificent building. The old man took the lead and rushed forward. The other 8 people followed him. At this moment, the alarm had not yet reached the front of the palace, and the guards patrolling in front of the palace were still slowly patrolling in an orderly manner. The sudden appearance of the 9 people immediately attracted the attention of the patrol team. But before they could give the order, the 9 people turned into 9 black shadows and quickly leaped to the top of the 1,000-story stairs. This mirage-like speed stunned the patrol team and the guards on each step, and they all turned their heads to look at the top of the stairs. There, the figures of the 9 people had disappeared into the depths of the palace. At 3 o'clock direction, 800 meters away, there is an inner desolate master. The graceful 3rd sister immediately pointed out the target. The old man's eyes flashed with killing intent. He didn't say anything and rushed in the direction pointed by the 3rd sister. His speed suddenly increased, and the distance between him and the 8 people increased rapidly. In front of him, the golden rubble of the palace was smashed open like a piece of paper. He broke through the wall and rushed all the way into the palace. The palace's main hall was extremely luxurious and spacious. Behind the main hall was a courtyard. At the moment, a middle-aged man was sitting next to a pond in the courtyard. He was talking to a lady wearing a strange official's robe. The middle-aged man's eyebrows suddenly twitched. His complexion changed. He suddenly got up and turned around. With a bang, the wall of the palace broke open. The old man suddenly rushed out from inside. At this moment, he didn't look old at all. Instead, he was like a lion out of its cage, arrogant and domineering. "Who is it?" The lady saw the newcomer, and her complexion changed. She stood up and shouted. The middle-aged man's pupils shrank. Black mucus flowed out of his clothes and covered his whole body. He had entered the demonic state. His demonic body was extremely ferocious and terrifying. His entire body was covered with sharp blades, as if he was a creature made up of countless scythes and swords. Sharp whisker-like blades grew out of his cheeks and other parts of his face like daggers. Other than his eyes, almost every part of his body was covered with blades. If Dean saw this scene, he would immediately recognize that it was the magic marks of the splitter. Chapter 749. The middle-aged man was shocked when he heard the old man's words. Although the magic mark of the splitter was a rare legendary magic mark, but it wasn't the first time that it had appeared in history. The feeling that the old man gave him was extremely dangerous. He was absolutely a master of the inner wilderness, or even stronger. There was no reason for such a person to not recognize the magic mark of the splitter. Moreover, the latter's words were a bit strange. The middle-aged man was startled. Several whistling sounds came from the palace. It was the other 8 people. The middle-aged man looked up, and suddenly his face turned pale. The hairs on his back stood up. These 8 people gave him the feeling that their strength was not weaker than him. "You are not from here." He took a deep breath as he felt the haze of death shrouding his body. However, he didn't dare to retreat. "Where do you come from? What are you doing here?" "His Majesty is the Abyss Walker. If you don't want to die, then leave immediately." "Of course I know that your Majesty is the Abyss Walker." The crooked old man smiled. "Every wall lord is an Abyss Walker. Unfortunately, even if he is the Lord of the Abyss, what can he do? Can he save you?" The hope in the middle-aged man's heart was instantly extinguished. His heart was full of fear. He knew that these people were not the refugees scattered outside the giant wall. They came from another giant wall. Moreover, they also knew that His Majesty wasn't here. This showed that their invasion was premeditated. Suddenly, his mind flashed like a thunderbolt. He instantly thought of the purpose of the 9 people from the other giant wall. "You want to rob our goddess Sylvia's body? Don't even think about it." The anger in his heart instantly surpassed the fear. He roared, "I won't let you succeed, even if I die." His voice was so loud that it spread throughout the palace. "It's a bit difficult to die." The crooked old man indifferently smiled. He looked at the fat man next to him. "Second brother, this devil body should be your dish. I will leave it to you to deal with it." "Big brother, can you not call me second brother? It sounds strange," the fatty muttered, even though he said that his body walked towards the state preceptor. As he walked, he entered the demon body. The disc hanging on his back melted, turning into black mucus that covered his entire body. In the blink of an eye, his demon body was revealed. This was a huge fatty that was close to 4 meters tall. His body was round, and other than the outline of his 4 limbs, he was similar to the spherical black hell. When a middle-aged man saw that the 9 of them did not take him seriously and did not join forces to attack him, he was slightly relieved. However, when he saw the strange demon body of the fat man, he could not help but stare. He had never seen this kind of demon body before. It was definitely not the appearance of the 8 legendary magic marks that he knew. Of course, he had only seen 7 of the 8 legendary magic marks. As for the number 1 dream breeder, he had never seen it, but he did not expect it to be this ugly and simple. Fatty walked forward slowly, seemingly in no hurry. When the state master saw this, he slowly backed up. It wasn't because he was scared, but rather because he wanted to slowly increase the distance between him and his companions. This was to avoid being saved by his companions when he attacked. "What are you running for? Looking at your demon body, you should be very good at attacking. Come and hit me," the fatty shouted. The state master ignored him and continued to slowly retreat. He looked at the demon body of the fat man and guessed that he was not good at speed. Instead, he leaned towards passive defense. The fatty saw him continue to retreat and was a little impatient. "Didn't you just say that you wouldn't let us succeed, even if you died? Why are you so scared now? Really, since you're not attacking, I will." The state master stared at him, not daring to relax. The fatty moved as soon as he said he would. His body suddenly shot towards the state master with incomparably fast speed. The state master's pupil shrank. He did not expect such a large body to be so fast. However, he was already prepared and instantly counterattacked. The sharp blades on his body moved like a peacock spreading its tail. Each blade rubbed against each other, giving off a metallic texture. He pounced towards the fatty, and the sharp blades shot into his body like countless swords before spinning. His movements were swift, and the sharp blades on his body shook rapidly, creating terrifying destruction. The fatty's body was cut hundreds of times in an instant, but not a single drop of blood flowed out. After a series of attacks from a state master, he felt from the sharp blades that each attack was successful. When he retreated, he originally thought that the fatty had been cut into countless pieces. However, when he looked over, he was shocked to find that the fatty was still standing in his original position. There were countless lines on his body, all of them for his cuts. However, there was no blood seeping out. Moreover, these lines were gradually fading until they completely healed and disappeared. How is this possible? He stared with wide eyes in disbelief. The attack just now was enough to kill him hundreds of times, but he was not injured at all. It seems that my ability just happens to restrain you. Fatty saw his expression as though he had seen a ghost and grinned. He suddenly pounced forward, his fat body hugging the Grand State Preceptor like lightning. He opened his mouth wide, and his mouth seemed elastic enough to swallow a human head. He directly sucked the Grand State Preceptor's head into his mouth, and then his body slowly hugged the Grand State Preceptor. The State Master's body seemed to sink into a swamp. He struggled with all his might, but the effect was weak. Very quickly, the fatty's body became twice as fat, but there were sharp blades sticking out from every part of his body. It was as if he was covered in spikes. He patted his belly and grinned. This guy's a bit hard to digest. I think it will take some time. It seems that the top experts in this god wall are only SOSO too weak. The graceful third sister shook her head. It's not that he is weak, it's that second brother's ability is too special, perfectly restraining his attack type. Another handsome youth with long hair said, "That kind of demon body. One look, and you can tell how terrifying it is. If it was us, we might not be able to beat him in a one-on-one fight. His attack power is too strong." Little 3, look at the place where the war goddess's body was buried. There should be explorers around. The hunchbacked elder said coldly. The graceful girl could not help but mumble, "Big brother, can you not call me that? How many times have I told you?" "That's right." The fatty immediately agreed. "Mine too. You have to change it. Less bullshit, move faster." The hunchbacked elder frowned. The graceful girl slightly pouted, but she still spread out her perception net. After a while, her face was a bit surprised. She looked down and said, "Below, there are 5 experts. 4 of them are explorers. The other one's strength I can't sense. Wait, there are 2 more things. Are they demons?" "Demons? Why would demons be here? Are they the ones they tamed?" "I didn't expect these people to have such methods, to be able to tame demons. How strong are they?" Chapter 750. 2. It should be the 2 commanders of the king's city. They looked out of the palace and could see 2 blazing figures rushing over from the street below the 1,000 steps outside the palace like blazing suns. In the past few days, they had sneaked into various places and captured pioneers who were clearing the undeads outside. They had learned about the history of the giant wall, as well as the current situation of the various forces. Because of this understanding, they were fearless. Wait! Yamos, who was rushing to the palace at full speed, suddenly stopped. Kite, who was next to him, also stopped and looked at him. What happened? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yamos looked at the towering royal palace in front of him. The resplendent and dazzling building made him shudder with fear and trepidation. His face was full of shock. How is this possible? There are so many experts. How many? Kite knew that Yamo's perception was stronger than his own. Seeing his shocked appearance, his heart sank. How can there be so many masters all of a sudden? They also invaded the palace. Do they want to rob His Majesty's seal? No. It is impossible for the Devil Clan to do such a stupid thing. They don't have so many masters. Yamos muttered to himself. Soon, his eyes widened as he involuntarily exclaimed, "They came from other places?" Kite's heart jumped. What's going on? Yamos was startled for a moment. He suddenly thought of something. His eyes revealed a panic-stricken color as he turned to look at Kite. Quickly inform the Devil Clan and the monastery. They are from another giant wall. They should want to rob the remains of the god of war. What? Kite was shocked. He quickly reacted and looked at the quiet palace. There was an inexplicable throbbing in his heart. Although he couldn't see what kind of danger was hidden inside, his intuition told him that if he went there, he would die without a doubt. Moreover, there was a national master in the palace all year round. But at this moment, there was no sign of fighting. This could only mean that the national master had been killed. We must not let them rob the remains of the god of war. Kite took a deep breath and solemnly said to him, "You stay here and observe the situation. I will immediately inform them. We must delay them no matter what." "I will." Yamos clenched his teeth. Snatching the corpse of the war goddess Sylvia was absolutely unacceptable. This wasn't as simple as blasphemy. Kite quickly turned around and left, his figure disappearing into the streets. This time, his speed was even faster than when he came. He was worried that the enemies in the palace would try to stop him, so he activated his demon body and ran at full speed. Alarms had also been sounded throughout Royal City. All the commoners on the streets consciously returned to their homes, not daring to stay on the streets. When the alarms sounded throughout Royal City, the troops stationed in the suburbs immediately marched into the city. Like a black torrent, they poured in from every street and headed for the royal palace in the center of the city. One ran away. He must have sensed us and ran to spread the news. The graceful woman frowned slightly and said to the hunchbacked old man, "Big brother, aren't we going to stop them?" "It's fine." The hunchbacked old man indifferently glanced at her. "Even if he doesn't go, the experts of the other forces will soon know about the changes here. After all, this is Royal City. It is impossible for these forces to not have an intelligence network in Royal City. Even if he calls all the experts of the Devil Clan, it will be too late. Let's go get the god's corpse first." Gee, let him call. The more people he calls, the better. We can also warm up. Anyway, without the god's corpse, this divine wall will be destroyed sooner or later. Instead of that, why not let us kill to our heart's content? Haha, my blood is boiling. Seeing their excited expressions, the graceful woman slightly pursed her lips and smiled. "That's true. We should go down as soon as possible. I think the people underground have sensed us. We can't let them move the god's corpse." "Little Six, hurry up," the hunchbacked old man ordered. Little Six was a short but strong man with dark skin. Hearing the order, he grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. The giant axe on his back quickly turned into liquid and covered his entire body. He had entered his demon form. His appearance was strange. He was a monster that looked like a scorpion and a lizard. He crawled on the ground. Including his tail, his body was more than 5 meters long. His 4 claws pressed on the ground and quickly dug the soil. The ground of this courtyard was made of stone, but it was quickly dug by his claws. The soil was quickly pushed away, and soon a pitch-black hole appeared. His digging speed was astonishing. The hunchbacked old man and the others jumped into the tunnel he dug. They slid all the way, and soon they were out of the tunnel. The other end of this tunnel led to the secret passage under the palace. There were a few wall lamps in the secret passage. The light was dim, and they quickly went down the stairs. Whoosh, whoosh. The hunchbacked old man at the very front stepped on the stairs. The stone walls on both sides instantly shot out a dense number of poisonous arrows. The tall and sturdy old four reacted very quickly. He suddenly roared and waved the giant blade in his hand. Clanging sounds rang out, and all the poisonous arrows were blocked. At the same time, his giant blade slashed at the stone wall beside him, instantly destroying the mechanism. However, the broken mechanism sprayed out a poisonous fog that quickly flowed into the tunnel. The few people's expressions changed. They didn't expect the person who designed this trap to be so sinister. He had calculated that the invaders would use violent methods to break the wall. This was the condition for activating the poisonous fog mechanism. Old 2, the hunchbacked old man covered his nose and roared. The fat man still maintained his demon form. His body was still covered with sharp blades. When he heard the old man's words, his face showed a trace of helplessness. However, his movements were very agile. He suddenly bulged his stomach and opened his mouth. The poisonous fog that filled the tunnel immediately rushed into his mouth and was swallowed by him. Burp! The fat man burped and patted his stomach. Just as he was about to speak, his expression suddenly changed. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of green phlegm. It landed on the ground and corroded a hole in the stairs. His face and stomach also quickly changed color, turning green. "Second brother, are you okay?" the graceful woman asked. The fat man's body trembled slightly. He swayed left and right as if he was drunk. After a while, he regained some consciousness. He panted and said, "I'm fine. Let's continue." Little six, go through the wall and destroy the trap below. The hunchbacked old man glanced at the fat man and said to the short, sturdy man. The short, sturdy man nodded and immediately dug into the wall. Everyone be careful. These people should have set up many traps. Second brother, are you feeling better? The hunchbacked old man cautiously went down while asking the fat man behind him. The fat man shook his head slightly. Second brother will be fine after eating a normal poison and farting. I didn't expect the poisonous fog to be so powerful. Second brother's complexion is still so bad. The tall and sturdy old four's expression was solemn. Fatty rolled his eyes and said, I also want to fart now, but I'm afraid I'll suffocate you guys. Then you'd better hold it in. Seeing that he could still joke, the graceful woman knew that he should be fine, and her heart was also relieved. At this time, the group continued to walk down for more than 100 meters, but they did not encounter any more traps. Obviously, they had all been destroyed by Old Six, who had drilled into the wall. However, although the trap had failed, it still made the secret passage below difficult to walk. Some steps were full of sharp thorns, making it impossible to step on them. Some steps were filled with poisonous water. Although the trap was no longer hidden, it was still lethal in the open. The group advanced with great difficulty. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire ground sank and trembled slightly. Everyone hurriedly steadied themselves, somewhat shocked. What happened? Could it be another trap? They were bewildered and did not dare to move forward. The graceful woman spread out her perception net and looked over. Her pupils suddenly shrank, and she cried out involuntarily, "Sixth brother!" She was stunned for a moment, and the next moment, she hurriedly rushed down regardless of the possible hidden dangers on the steps below. She came to a corner of the secret passage below and stopped. She took out the sharp sword on her back and chopped the rocks on the wall, looking sad and angry. The others suddenly felt that something was wrong. They immediately went forward to help and asked at the same time, "What happened?" "Sixth brother is in here. He's trapped." The graceful woman was sad and angry. She clung to the wall with her fingers. Her beautiful painted nails were scratched and bleeding, but she did not feel it. What? The others couldn't believe that Old Six was trapped in the soil. It was not an exaggeration to say that he lived in the soil. How deep is he inside? The burly old four asked hurriedly. 2 meters. The graceful woman seemed to know what he was going to do, and she took 2 steps back. Old Four growled and slashed out with his giant sword. With a loud bang, the rocks exploded. The depth was about 3 meters. He immediately waved the giant sword again and slashed out again. Soon, a gap was cut out, but there was blood seeping out of this gap. Everyone looked at the blood that was seeping out in disbelief. Everyone was furious, and their necks turned red. They all took action and quickly broke the wall, digging out Old Six from inside. But at this moment, Old Six was already dead. His body was flat, and his internal organs, eyeballs, and other organs were all broken. When he was dug out, he was like a pile of bloody mud, crushed to pieces. The stooped old man and the other 7 looked at the bloody corpse in disbelief. Among them, the one who was the best at fighting underground actually died underground. And looking at the wounds on the corpse, it was clearly crushed to death. This was simply unimaginable. It was as absurd as a fish drowning, but the truth was right in front of them, and they could not refute it. Old Six. The burly man roared in grief and anger. He clenched his fist and fiercely smashed the wall. They were leisurely and did not take the experts in the God Wall seriously. But they did not expect that they would lose a brother before they even fought with the experts here. The stooped old man stared blankly at the blood in his hand. The angry roars and wails of the people around him also entered his ears, making him feel unreal. He took a deep breath, and his eyes revealed an intense, killing intent. He said, "Don't let a single one of them go. I want to kill them all. Kill them all. Take revenge for Old Six. I want to dismember their corpses into 10,000 pieces and kill every single one of them. They roared in grief and indignation. They could not wait to capture the people and kill them. The stooped old man gritted his teeth and clenched the blood in his hand. The killing intent in his eyes gradually became cold. He looked at the graceful woman and said, "Little Six fell into the trap inside the wall." "Yes, big brother." The graceful woman's eyes were red. She gritted her teeth and said, "The sound we heard before should be the sound of the trap being activated." The person who set up the trap must have considered that among the intruders, there would be people who are good at drilling. Little Six must have wanted to destroy a trap, but the trap was a bait, and he fell into the trap instead. The person who set up this trap must be someone who is very familiar with drilling. Isn't there a rock tribe in that devil clan? It must be their plan. I want to kill them all. The stooped old man slowly walked up the stairs. His eyes were gloomy. He said, "Let's slow down. Little Three, you pay attention to the situation underground. See if they will move the god's corpse." "I know." The graceful woman did not mind the way he called her. She wiped away her tears and followed closely behind him. The stooped old man took the lead. This time, he did not pursue speed. Under careful observation, they found many traps and mechanisms. They solved them one by one without triggering any traps. Half an hour later, they finally arrived at the bottom of the palace. Along the way, it was more daunting than dangerous. Although they still triggered some traps, there were no more casualties. When they arrived at the bottom, they saw that it was an extremely spacious underground tomb. The light was dim, and there were many precious gems embedded in the walls, emitting a faint light. In the middle of the mausoleum, there was a huge coffin that was nearly 10 meters long. It was snow white and made of metal. There were exquisite, streamlined patterns on it, and there were many patterns on the coffin. The patterns depicted a woman with a face that could be considered perfect. She was high up, and behind her was a huge wall. In front of her were countless monsters. These monsters were of all shapes and sizes, but most of them had the shape of a strange snake. These snake-like creatures had no legs, and their bodies were much thicker than snakes. They stood upright, and there seemed to be a horn and a pair of eyes on top of their heads. There were so many of these monsters that it was hard to count. It was a huge beast tide, and it almost drowned half of the beautiful woman's body. The god's coffin. The stooped old man saw the god's coffin in the middle of the tomb at first glance. He squinted his eyes and looked around. He saw that there was a black pool around the god's coffin. There seemed to be an undercurrent flowing in the pool. The next moment, 3 giant heads suddenly jumped out of the pool. They were like giant pythons, and their mouths were full of malevolence. They breathed in and out, and they stared at the stooped old man and the others. "There's another one on the wall." The graceful woman immediately pointed. The others looked over and saw that the wall she was pointing at was only an ordinary wall. There was nothing strange about it, but since she said so, it was obvious that the demon was good at disguising itself and was hiding there. "Kill!" The stooped old man squeezed out a word through his teeth. Chapter 751. Piracy detected. The inner wall is still in chaos, but we can see the shadow of the army cleaning up the isolated disaster cities. They said that it won't take long for order to be restored in those places. Noyce reported the news from his spies. Dean nodded. "Tell them to go deep into the 12 cities under the protection of the Earls. Don't easily expose their whereabouts." Noyce looked at Dean and whispered, "Master, what should we do next?" "In my opinion, the inner wall will definitely send strong people to attack us after the disaster is quelled. There are many strong people in the monastery, the military, and the devil families in the inner wall. Do you think we can deal with the traps we left behind?" "That's not how the battle is calculated." Dean gently tapped his fingers on the table. 10 small soldiers to wipe out 10 of the enemy's small soldiers? This is what pigs do. The value of a commander is to defeat the strong with the weak and defeat the many with the few. Although the possibility of a war breaking out between us and them is not great, we are currently in the dark. If we really want to talk about the comparison of strength, Just the forces you just mentioned have at least 15 pioneers in the inner wilderness. If they come out in full force, we will naturally be destroyed. Even if they only send 2 or 3, it is enough to hurt our vitality. So many? Noyce was shocked when he heard Dean's words. Although he was at the limitless level and his strength was low, but he knew a lot about the pioneers from Dean's side. Each of the masters in the inner wilderness was beyond the existence of the 10 military gods. They were comparable to Aisha, but there were 15 of them. It was terrifying. On the contrary, they only had one in their hands. 1 against 15. One didn't need to think to know the result of such a battle. Don't worry, Dean calmly said. Even if there are 15 of them, there won't be many of them. Most of them won't come to the outer wall to attack us. Even the patriarch of the devil families won't come. As for the 3 commanders of the military, they will only send 1 or 2 at most. It's impossible for them to come out in full force. After all, in their eyes we're the same existence as the barbarians. Even so, the remaining ones are enough to defeat us. Noyce looked at Dudian. He didn't know why Dudian was so calm. The current situation was a sure win for them. Dudian wanted to overthrow the inner wall, so sooner or later he would have to confront them. At that time, he would have to come up with comparable strength. That's why I have to go to the inner wall as soon as possible. The military won't send anyone if the Earl is willing to live in the outer wall. Dudian said. Noyce was stunned and puzzled. Dean didn't talk to him anymore and let him leave. He took the information and came to an alchemy room halfway up the mountain. In this alchemy room, the top alchemy warlocks and potioneers of the Dark Council were conducting experiments. These people were all wanted criminals, and now they were called to work for him under his nose. However, he still had to be secretive when he went out. After all, the other Vatican staff did not know that the followers of darkness they were searching for were right beside him. Dean handed the information to an alchemist in a laboratory. The alchemist's hair was sparse, and there were only a few strands left. His face was swollen and ugly. He couldn't tell his age. He would scare a lot of people if he went out. But the other alchemists and potioneers respected him. Make it as soon as possible and inject it into a batch of fleas. Dudian ordered. Yes, Mr. President, the alchemist answered respectfully. Dean turned and left. The information he handed to him was about a contagious virus. It had a resounding name in the old era. It was called smallpox. He was going to throw this thing into the cities under the protection of the 12 earls. It would trigger the smallpox plague and create chaos once again. At the same time, he would force the earls to open the city gates so that the other aristocrats who were sheltered would migrate out of the safe place. He didn't use the corpse poison this time because the effect of the corpse poison was too strong. Once infected, they would die without a doubt. It wouldn't cause too much trouble for the military. Moreover, this kind of virus couldn't be cured for a while. It was contagious, so they couldn't kill or touch it. I didn't expect to use the same trick in the ancient times. I used the nobles to command the army. Dudian thought about the consequences of smallpox spreading to various cities. His mind couldn't help but recall the face of the little girl and his grandfather. The dirty little face left a deep impression on him. It wasn't that the face was special and innocent, but the situation was created by him. There are many people he couldn't see who would be in a similar situation. They would be homeless and have no place to stay. They would be struggling to survive in the city full of undeads. He sighed softly in his heart. He felt a little guilty, but it was only a little. When the number of people killed increased, perhaps the number of lives stained on his hands was only a number, a silhouette, or even a piece of territory, of victory. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. The smallpox virus that Dean had given to the pharmacist camp had been completed. The efficiency was very fast with the information provided by Dean and any materials that could be deployed from the outer wall. Noyce rushed over as Dean received the smallpox virus. Master, there is news from the inner wall. Something big has happened. Something important? Dean's eyelids twitched. Say it. 2 days ago, a group of unknown experts attacked Monarch City and destroyed the palace. It is said that many people were killed. Even the Grand National Preceptor was killed. Many experts from the monasteries and hunter families were also killed. Noyce said quickly. Dean was stunned. He widened his eyes and looked at him in surprise. A strong man of unknown origin attacked King City and even destroyed the palace? Did the monastery and the hunter families participate in the war? Noyce smiled as he saw Dean's incredulous expression. I also suspect that there is a problem with the information, but the information from several people is the same. It should be true. The monastery and the hunter families are participating in the war. It's impossible for them to launch the attack. Dean muttered. He frowned as a horrible idea emerged in his mind. Did these people come from the kingdom of God? But why would the kingdom of God suddenly attack the palace? He thought for a moment and then asked Noyce. The news came 2 days ago. Why did it take so long? Wasn't the intelligence network connected? Chapter 752. Indeed, it was too slow. There was a trace of annoyance in Dean's heart. It was a great opportunity, but the news was too slow. He immediately asked, what is the current situation? Are they still there? Do you know why they attacked the palace? They're still in the inner wall. Noyce replied. Dean was relieved. It is said that there were 8 or 9 attackers. They were very strong and destroyed the palace. Their purpose seemed to be to seize the remains of Goddess Sylvia. Noyce quickly narrated, but then the 2 commanders who were guarding the palace arrived and pinned them down. Then the people from the devil families arrived, and a war broke out in the palace. It is said that the scene of the battle was terrible. Countless civilian casualties were caused. Even the walls were destroyed. The group of attackers couldn't resist the pursuit of the devil families and the military. They fled to the Padgel Mountains. They were besieged by the 3 devil families and the military. There is no other news. Padgel Mountains? The outline of the mountains appeared in Dean's mind. He had seen it on the map. It was a famous and dangerous mountain range in the inner wall. There were countless beasts in it. Even the seasoned hunters wouldn't dare to get close to it. Even the hunters with magic marks wouldn't dare to enter it easily. It was easy to get lost in there. The terrain was extremely complex and mysterious. 8 or 9 people attacked the palace and destroyed it. Such power isn't something that ordinary pioneers can do. They must be at least military god level or even inner baron level. Dean's eyes lit up. Although the Wall Lord isn't here, but in addition to the 3 supreme commanders, there are definitely other strong people. The National Master was a master of inner baron level, but he was killed. Then the 2 supreme commanders rushed over. It means that the 2 supreme commanders were already in the King's City. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to get the news so quickly and rush over. They were the masters of the inner baron, but they couldn't stop the attackers. The 3 devil families arrived, but they couldn't stop the attackers. It means that there were at least 5 or more inner baron level masters among the attackers. Attacked the palace to seize the body of Goddess of War? The history of the outer wall recorded that the Goddess of War had disappeared a long time ago. She had died. Dean was lost in thought. Why do you want a body when people die? Is there a big secret hidden in it? Or could it be that the real target of the attacker was the King's Seal, using this matter to cover up? If it's to seize the King's Seal, then it's too stupid. But if it's to seize the god's corpse, then there should be a more thorough plan, and there shouldn't be such a big movement. Unless the attacker is an outsider. Dean speculated that the attackers were from outside the giant wall. But he didn't know if they were from the kingdom of God or another giant wall. When he learned about the existence of the kingdom of God, he guessed that it also existed in other giant wall, but he didn't have any information to confirm it. The difference between the 2 was very big for him. If it came from other giant wall, it meant that he had reached the level of inner wasteland. It was possible to cross the wasteland and go to another giant wall. If it came from the divine kingdom, then it was really dangerous. It was very likely that something happened to the Wall Lord in the divine kingdom. I have to go to the inner wall myself. Dean thought for a while and made a decision. He couldn't filter out more effective information by listening to the information. After all, the credibility of rumors wasn't high. It was better to see in person. However, it was undoubtedly very dangerous. He was a sensitive person. Whether it was the attackers or the masters of the inner wall, they would attack him. "Master, it's too dangerous," Noyce said in a hurry. Dean waved his hand. "You and Barton will guard this place when I'm not here. If there is an enemy attack, then leave immediately." He went back to the temple to prepare. After a moment, he spread out his wings. He held Aisha's waist and flew into the sky. They went straight towards the direction of the inner wall. Pagel Mountains. There was a cliff and a valley. 6 silhouettes sat around a giant silver coffin. Some of them had their backs against the coffin, while others sat on the coffin. If others were to see what these people were doing, they would be enraged. This was blasphemy against the goddess of battles. The hunchbacked old man sat on top of the divine casket with his eyes closed. Bean-sized beads of cold sweat dripped down from his temples. His face was flushed, and his wrinkled fingers were trembling slightly, as if he was trying his best to hold back something. Fatty, who was standing beside him, looked at him worriedly and whispered, "Can Big Brother hold on?" "Second brother, what are you talking about?" The fourth brother, who was standing next to him, said in an angry tone, "It's just a little bit of poison. How can Big Brother be defeated? This bunch of damn grandsons are too damn treacherous, using all kinds of underhanded tricks. Once Big Brother's injuries are healed, I'll definitely go back and avenge old 6, old 9, and old 10. This isn't an ordinary poison." The graceful woman who was leaning against the divine coffin held her arm. Only a small part of her arm remained. It was broken from the elbow down. She had a worried look on her face as she said, "Who would have thought that such a small toad would have such a strong poison? It's too terrifying. If it was us, we would have died on the spot. Fortunately, Big Brother is strong enough to endure until now. If I had known, I would have caught that toad and eaten it," Fatty mumbled. A handsome young man with long hair sighed and said, "Even if it's you, you probably won't be able to digest it. To be able to poison Big Brother to this extent, this little thing is too scary. If Big Brother wasn't poisoned and injured in the underground, then those bastards wouldn't have come. 9th and 10th brother wouldn't have died." The burly man gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. There was a huge cut on his chest, but it had turned into a bloody scab. It looked particularly ferocious. All 6 of them were injured. Some of them were seriously injured, but some of them were just cut by swords. They didn't have a broken limb. If we had known earlier, we would have gone to the 3 devil families and killed them one by one. Didn't Big Brother say that we would have alerted King City? If they moved the corpse to a place we don't know, it would be hard to find it. We underestimated the people in the Divine Wall. Although they don't have a ruler, I didn't expect there to be so many desolate experts. Especially that stinky woman. She's too hard to deal with. Old 9 died at her hands. I must kill her. Once Big Brother is cured, he will avenge 9th and 10th brother." Fatty sighed and said, "Everyone should recuperate and recover as soon as possible. Those damn things are still surrounding us, probably discussing how to deal with us. We must protect Big Brother. Once the poison is neutralized, we must kill them all." Chapter 753. The Periphery of the Pagel Mountains. Dozens of tyrannical auras were standing on a high slope. They were divided into 5 camps. If there were people familiar with the forces of the inner wall, then they would be able to identify the identity of these people by looking at the patterns on their armors and badges. In addition to the military and the monastery, there were also Demon Hunter Clan with Black Dragon pattern engraved on their armor. There were also Demon Hunter Clan with 4 wings engraved on their armor. There was also Demon Hunter Clan with a tortoiseshell emblem. On the flat ground in front of these people, several figures with unfathomable auras stood together, forming a small circle to discuss something. Princess Eureka is the real Lord War, God Sylvia sealed in the divine coffin that these people are fighting over? A burly man who was nearly 3 meters tall asked. His voice was deep and powerful, like rolling thunder surging in his throat, and his tone was dignified without being angry. He was asking about a slender girl. She was not short, but when she stood in front of him, she only reached his abdomen, which made her look petite and cute. She was wearing a unique crown and had a noble and elegant temperament. She slightly frowned and said, "Of course, The remains of the war god Sylvia have always been sealed under the palace. These people killed the great state master, the 4 pioneers who guarded the divine casket, and the former state master. Even the 2 mythological beasts guarding the divine casket were killed. Fortunately, Commander Kate called you here in time. Now, they're all seriously injured. You should eliminate them as soon as possible and take back the remains of Sylvia. Don't attack. Next to her, a woman wearing a golden robe with fire totems burning at the edges shook her head slightly. She was elegant and graceful, looking like a young lady in her 20s or a charming young married woman in her 30s. She had a unique and cold temperament. Her expression was calm as she said indifferently, "If they are forced into a corner and destroy the god's remains, we will not be able to bear the consequences. Yes, these people are the masters of the inner wall. I have never seen such a devil body before. It's very likely that they will destroy the god's remains if they are forced to a dead end." The one who spoke was an old man draped in the cloak of a monastery missionary. He had a scholarly and sacred temperament that was very convincing. Eureka became anxious when she saw their hesitation. She said, "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. One of them was injured by the poison arrow frog, and 2 of them are dead. The rest are also seriously injured. If we don't act now, it will be even more difficult to take back the god's remains when they recover. Once they take the god's remains, we will all be destroyed. Your Highness, don't worry." The previous giant said in a deep voice, "We won't let them move the god's remains out of the giant wall. There are only 6 of them left. Although all of them are masters of the inner wilderness, we won't lose to them. Dragon Mother, Old Niao and I are enough to suppress the 3 of them. Mr. Dirk, Yamos, and Kite can also contain the 3 of them. With the help of so many pioneers, it won't be difficult to stop them. But, yes, we have to find a way to separate them from the god's coffin, so that they have no time to take care of it." Eureka slightly clenched her fingers. Her heart was burning with anxiety. Her father had left the giant wall for the god's kingdom. She didn't expect that there would be such a big mess. However, she also knew that it was impossible for them to attack the god's coffin. Unless. There was no unless. She lowered her head and remained silent. A figure was flying in the sky above the wasteland. It was Dean. He spread his wings and flew at full speed. Most of the pioneers must have gone to the front line after the king's palace was destroyed. He wasn't afraid of exposing himself by flying so high. In contrast, he was more concerned about the current situation of the attackers. It would be an opportunity for him, if possible. He bypassed some city routes that were under the protection of the Earls and went all the way to the central area of the inner wall. He looked down from the sky when he was close to the king's city. He flew around the city and saw that the west side of the wall was destroyed. There was a huge gap that was tens of meters long. It wasn't difficult to imagine what kind of earth-shattering battle had broken out at that time. At present, there were a lot of wall builders building the wall. Soldiers were patrolling back and forth. The security was even more strict. In addition, he saw that all the gates were closed. It was obvious that they wanted to block people from entering and exiting. He hit his breath and jumped over the wall from the opposite side. The guards here were relatively weak. He sneaked into the king's city and disguised himself as an ordinary civilian to inquire about the news. Dean flew out of the king's city again after half an hour. This time, it was particularly easy to inquire about the news. It seemed that everyone in the king's city didn't know about the news. Everyone was talking about it. Dean found that although there were some discrepancies, the general situation was the same. The attackers broke into the king's city, destroyed the palace, and killed the Grandmaster. They were besieged by the devil's family and fled in panic. In addition, some people saw that the attackers were carrying a huge silver coffin that was 10 meters long when they escaped. I didn't expect that these people would really come to rob the god's corpse. But Sylvia's corpse was placed in a 10 meters long coffin. Dean was thinking as he flew towards the Padgel Mountains. There should be a big secret hidden in the body of the goddess of war. Or it should have an extremely important role. The people from the other giant wall, or the kingdom of God, didn't hesitate to cross over the dangerous abyss and wasteland to snatch the body. However, Only the abyssal walkers could cross the abyss area. Even the pioneers of the dominating level could fall in the abyss area. But if there were abyssal walkers among these people, then they shouldn't have been repelled and escaped. Did the devil's family send people who were abyssal walkers? Dean couldn't figure it out. The information was too scarce. The main reason was that these big forces had been rooted in the inner wall for hundreds of years. Their foundation was deep. It was hard to guarantee that there weren't any hidden forces that outsiders couldn't probe. However, he felt that it was unlikely that there were abyss walkers in the three big families of witchers. If there were such strong people, there was no need for them to keep hiding. Showing them would create more value. It would be enough to make other people submit to them, and they could also expand the barren area on a large scale. If this possibility wasn't established, then it meant that there were no abyssal walkers among the attackers. At the same time, it meant that they used other methods to come here. Chapter 754. Could it be that they flew over from the sky? Dean couldn't help but think of this possibility. After all, the land was full of monsters. It was almost impossible to cross the land. One must have the power of Abyss Walker in order to cross the land and cross all the way. But if they flew from the sky, as far as he knew, there were thunderbirds in the clouds. If they flew too low, then it would be easy to become the target of the monsters on land. If they flew too high, then it would be easy to be detected by the thunderbirds. Unless their mounts were flying dragons, which the thunderbirds wouldn't attack. Dean's eyes lit up as he thought of this. These ambushers were riding on flying dragons. If this is the case, then their dragons should stay outside the giant wall to avoid any accidents. In that case, they will stay in the giant wall forever and can't leave. They can only wait for the wall lord to come back. Dean's heart was pounding as he thought about the possibility of it. However, he knew that this was only the first possibility. The second possibility was that one of the attackers had some kind of special ability that could cover their scent and all traces, allowing them to pass through the abyss safely. But this possibility was not big. After all, these people obviously came here with a premeditated plan. They took advantage of the absence of the wall lord to come here. They should have calculated various factors. The abyss was the most unfathomable place. Any monster could appear there. No one could be 100% sure that their concealment ability could hide from the eyes of all the monsters in the abyss. After all, some monsters with top perception had unimaginable detection ability. So the first possibility was the most likely. If I can get their dragons, then I can go anywhere in the world. Even if it's the kingdom of God. Dean's heart was pounding. If he had the dragons, then even if his plan to rebel against the giant wall failed, he could escape. Even if he took control of the inner wall, he could use the dragons to go to other places in the future. He wouldn't be limited to the giant wall. He took a deep breath and suppressed the excitement in his heart. He thought for a little bit and immediately turned away. He flew towards a giant wall. Originally, he wanted to explore the situation of the Padgel Mountains. He wanted to observe the situation from a distance. But now, compared with this information, finding the dragons was obviously the most valuable. He could even use the dragons to negotiate with the attackers so that they could help him overthrow the inner wall. Where will they land the wyvern? It's not safe to leave a wyvern alone. After all, it's the only way for the 9 of them to return. At least 1 or even 2 people will be left to guard the wyvern. In other words, I may face 2 inner desolate level powerhouses. Dean thought. He looked at Aisha, who was in his arms. Her expression was calm, as usual. He felt some heartache and said in a low voice, I might need you to act later. Aisha was silent. Feeling guilty, he held her hand and flew forward silently. After a moment, he came to the giant wall and looked around. Outside the giant wall was an endless wasteland. The attackers appeared in the inner wall and directly attacked King City. It means that they have investigated and know the location of the sacred remains. Dean pondered in his heart. They should have been here for some time. Although this attack is quite stupid, but it also shows that they are so reckless. They should have absolute confidence. They should be in the inner wall. It means that they came to the giant wall through the route and direction of the route, and not the southern side of the outer wall. Otherwise, they would directly go to Mount Wu Tuo or the military and grab the strongest person to inquire about the information. Dean ruled out the possibility that the dragons were on the southern side of the giant wall. After all, the attackers were so confident that they would attack King City. They wouldn't be cautious enough to deliberately park the dragons on the southern side and sneak in from the other side. However, there were still 3 sides of the giant wall. The length of each side was extremely long. At his flying speed, it would take him 2 to 3 hours to fly to one side. It would take him 8 or 9 hours to fly to 3 sides. It was too long. If the attackers broke free from the siege of the military in the Pagel Mountains and bumped into him, then he would be out of luck. The giant wall near the sighing wall can be ignored. If they saw the sighing wall, then they would come to the outer wall out of curiosity. After all, the majesty of the sighing wall is enough to scare people. But they didn't come to the outer wall. Otherwise, my intelligence network would know about it. So they can't see the sighing wall from where they entered the giant wall. There must be at least one person in their team who has top perception ability. A master who is good at perception would be able to sense the source of sound more than 20 miles and smell more than 100 miles. The rest of the places from the sighing wall to the inner wall are likely to be the places where they entered the giant wall. Dudian thought for a moment. He flew along the giant wall and observed the situation outside the giant wall, as well as the situation on the giant wall. He kept a high level of concentration to detect any small details, especially the smell floating in the air. He felt that with the way these 9 people did things, it was unlikely that they would remove the scent he left behind. It had not rained for the past 2 days, so they would most likely stand on the city wall and observe for a while. The giant wall was stained with their scent. Although it was faint, it was enough for him to detect. Dean flew for about half an hour. He stopped and gently inhaled. Soon his eyes locked on the giant wall in front of him. He flew over and carefully observed the giant wall. There was only one kind of smell, and he was very familiar with it. It was Haley's. She really didn't die. Dean's eyes flashed a trace of killing intent. He looked around and followed the faint fragrance. The smell seemed to float outside the giant wall. Did she come out of the giant wall? Moreover, although the smell was light, it seemed that it was left in the last 2 days. The mercury and toxins in her body should be seriously injured even if they were cleaned and cured. But she has the strength to run out again. Is it that the medical means of the inner wall is so brilliant that they can immediately make a full recovery? Dean's eyes flickered. He didn't believe it. Another possibility was that she had dragged her injured body and ran out. Chapter 755. Dean thought for a moment and decided to follow the smell of Hathaway. If he couldn't find her, then he would return and continue to look for the remaining attackers outside the giant wall. Although it was a bit late, but this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to kill Hathaway. He didn't want to miss it. Whoosh! He flew in the direction where the smell came from. After the smell came out of the giant wall, it didn't go in a straight line to the wasteland outside the hunting area. Instead, it stayed everywhere. The route was chaotic. Dean flew for a long time and was relieved. Judging from the route of the smell, Hathaway wasn't summoned to the wasteland, but seemed to wander outside the giant wall looking for something. 10 minutes later, Dean followed the smell and flew over a collapsed building. Suddenly, his pupils shrank. He lowered his body from the sky and landed on a building covered with moss and vines. He looked straight ahead and saw countless messy, collapsed buildings on the ground. He could vaguely see the shape of the streets of the old era. The streets were covered with weeds and small trees, obscuring the view. The visibility on land was not far, but his pupils shrank as he entered the semi-transparent pupil state. The weeds and small trees were easily penetrated. In his eyes, a figure exuding bursts of heat fluctuations was sitting more than 10 miles away. Because the distance was too far, the heat fluctuations were extremely weak, but he could clearly see it in the sky. It was an extremely eye-catching red dot. He thought for a moment, converged his breath, and let the blood flow through his frozen right arm. The blood flowed out again after penetrating his right arm. A chill spread throughout his body, as if he was in a cold winter, so cold that he wanted to shiver. He pursed his lips to reduce the heat in his body to a minimum. Then he slowly flew low, flapped his wings, and flew close to the ground. The speed was very slow, maintaining a speed slightly faster than walking, so that the wind was too strong and would not alarm the person. He didn't choose to walk because he was worried that the sound of walking would attract attention. As the distance slowly approached, the outline of the heat source gradually became clear. The latter was in a sitting posture, but one leg was straight and the other leg was bent inward. Her hands seemed to be playing with something. This sitting posture was obviously not a girl's sitting posture. Dean was startled. Suddenly, he thought of a possibility, and his heartbeat accelerated. Could it be that this was the remaining party of the attacker? He immediately stopped and scanned his surroundings, especially the sky. Under his careful observation, there were no other sources of heat in the surroundings, only this person. He frowned slightly and sniffed lightly. He could still smell Hathaway's scent in the air, which meant that she had also been here, and the direction in which the scent was drifting was in front. Could it be that Hathaway knew the remnants of the attackers? If that was the case, then his previous inference would have to be completely overturned. He pondered for a moment and glanced at Aisha. He hesitated for a moment and continued to sneak forward with her in his arms. If there is only one enemy with the strength of you and me, we should be able to kill him. But I don't know how she came here and seemed to have close contact with that person. Dean's eyes flickered slightly. Although there was some risk, at least the enemies were not two people as he expected, but one. From the rumors in King City, the attackers were all inner desolate level masters, and most of the people who stayed here were the same. It was impossible for them to leave the strongest pioneer of sovereign level here. Instead, a group of small fries ran to King City to invade. 2 minutes later, Dean slowly flew to a kilometer away from the person. At this distance, he could already see the bone structure of the person's body with his X-ray vision. If he quietly closed his eyes and listened carefully, he could even hear the sound of a dagger in the person's hand scratching the sand on the ground. He looked at the person from a distance. His eyes did not reveal any killing intent, nor did he focus on the wilderness, but he looked at the empty space. This person was wearing a big black robe and had his back to him. He could not see his age and face, but Dean could already smell Hathaway's smell in the air around him. It was far stronger than the smell he smelled along the way, indicating that Hathaway had stayed here for a period of time. This person is either an attacker or someone from another force that Hathaway colluded with. The two of them agreed to meet here. In contrast, the latter is more likely. Dean frowned. If this person was an attacker, Hathaway should not know them. In that case, when the two met, a battle must break out. But there were no traces of fighting around, and there was no smell of fresh blood. While he was thinking, suddenly a very low voice whispered, "Since you don't want to sneak attack me, then come out." These words came from the black-robed figure. Dean's face changed. He looked around, but there was no one else. Had the person already noticed him or deliberately blackmailed him? He held his breath and continued to lurk. "Come out." The black-robed figure turned his head and looked at Dean's direction. Under the loose black hood was the face of a teenager. There was no fluke in Dean's heart. His eyes were cold as he slowly walked out from the ruins of the building. He didn't pull Aisha out, but let her stay behind the stone wall. Inside the giant wall, the black-robed figure looked at Dean with interest. Outside the giant wall, Dean also looked at him, but his expression was cold. Outside the giant wall, the black-robed figure raised his eyebrows and said, "How do you know? Did something happen inside the giant wall? How did you find this place?" The relaxed smile on his face disappeared little by little. He realized that this was not a simple encounter. Dean saw that the black-robed figure didn't mention Aisha, so he was secretly relieved and asked, "How did you detect me?" "Oh, although you flew all the way here, and the airflow caused by the breeze is as gentle as a natural breeze, but you were too close, and your smell exposed your existence." The black-robed youth indifferently said, "You haven't answered my question yet. Are you from the kingdom of God or the other giant wall? Dean continued to ask. You don't have the power of the Abyss Walker. How did you cross the abyss? You have a lot of questions. There was a trace of sneer on the black-robed youth's face, but you haven't figured it out. You don't deserve to ask me questions. His figure suddenly flashed and rushed towards Dean. The black robe on top of his head was blown up by the wind, revealing the handsome face of a teenager. But his face didn't have the slightest bit of immaturity and cuteness, but cold, killing intent. Dean saw the intensity of the heat source in his body rise rapidly the moment he moved. It was like a burning fireball, and the intensity soared by several levels. It completely surpassed the intensity of Hero and Ronan's heat source. Dean's eyelids twitched as he quickly retreated and raised his hand. Whoosh! The distance of a kilometer passed in the blink of an eye. When the black-robed youth was about to reach the stone wall, Dean shook his wrist, and the bell rang. At the same time, the black-robed youth was just about to pass the stone wall when he suddenly heard the sound of feet stepping on the sand. He was horrified and turned his head to look. Instantly, he saw a peerlessly beautiful and bloodthirsty face. The eyes were pitch black and seemed like a whirlpool that wanted to swallow him. He was shocked, as he didn't expect that there would be a person hiding here. When he saw the black pupils in Aisha's eyes, he instantly understood that it wasn't a person but a king of corpses. Roar! Aisha rushed over with bared fangs and brandished claws. A strange limb suddenly shot out from the abdomen of the black-robed youth. He supported himself on the ground and instantly changed the direction of his body. He fell to the other side and narrowly escaped Aisha's sneak attack. After landing, the black-robed youth quickly opened the distance. Seeing Aisha rushing over, he still felt a bit unreal. This was clearly the king of corpses. The smell of the body was also the smell of the undead. Because of this, he didn't notice her existence. However, this king of corpses was obviously hidden here by the people in the wall. How could the people in the wall drive the king of corpses? He felt incredible, but at the moment there was no time to think too deeply. When the king of corpses was close to him, he quickly turned around. At the same time, the flesh on his back bulged. He stretched out two dark red wings and flew into the air. He looked at the roaring king of corpses under his feet and was relieved. He looked up at Dean in the distance. There was a trace of killing intent in his eyes. He quickly swooped toward Dean. Dean saw the shape of his wings. It wasn't any of the legendary magic marks that he had seen in the wall. He was shocked and instinctively thought of other rare magic marks under the legendary level. But the amount of information was too much. As soon as he thought of this, he stopped and immediately stimulated the king of corpses. At the same time, he shook the bell again and said in his heart, "I'm sorry." Roar. A roar came out when the bell rang. The black-robed youth who was flying toward Dean heard the roar and couldn't help but look back. His face suddenly changed. He saw the previous Aisha's face was ferocious. She stretched out her hands to grab him desperately, but she couldn't catch him. But her body had undergone earth-shaking changes. Black fluid oozed out of her body and covered her whole body. Dark dragon wings propped up from her back to block the sun. Fine black dragon scales appeared on her skin, including her neck and cheeks. They were all covered by the scales. She looked like a real demonic dragon. But what was more strange was that in the middle of the dragon wings on her back, there were several strange limbs. They were like human arms, but each arm was 2 or 3 meters long. 5 fingers were claws with sharp nails. Roar! Aisha, who had completed the demonic body, roared. She flapped her wings on the ground and flew into the air to catch up with the black-robed youth. Dean looked up at the completely liberated Aisha. His heart was perturbed. He secretly prayed. At the same time, he felt a little uncomfortable. Go to hell. The black-robed youth saw her chasing over and turned back to kill her. A sharp bone spur protruded from his arm, like a 2-meter-long spear, and stabbed toward Aisha, who was chasing from below. Aisha seemed to be in extreme anger. She didn't dodge and kept roaring. She! The bone spur spear pierced her shoulder on the spot and went all the way to her body. The demonic dragon scales on her body seemed to have no defensive effect at all. The black-robed youth was just about to withdraw his hand, but Aisha's speed was beyond his imagination. The monstrous arm in the middle of the wings behind her pounced over and immediately grabbed his arm. At the same time, Aisha's arms that had turned into dragon claws grabbed the black-robed youth's chest. His robe was torn, and even the armor inside was scratched with a few bloodstains. The black-robed youth's face was full of horror. The strength of this corpse king was beyond his expectation. He thought that the corpse king, which could be controlled by a small, ordinary pioneer like Dean, was not powerful, but the fact was completely opposite to what he thought. This was clearly a monster, and its strength was several times his. He twisted his arm violently and broke away from the monstrous arm on Aisha's back. He kicked Aisha's shoulder. The latter didn't dodge and was immediately kicked by him. He used the momentum to accelerate forward and flew at full speed toward Dean in front of him. Go to hell! His face was full of crazy, killing intent. A sharp tail suddenly appeared from his abdomen, like the poisonous tail behind Scorpion. There were barbs, but they grew from the abdomen and curved a hook toward Dean. Dean's face changed. He knew that the black-robed youth wanted to kill him, make Aisha lose control, and then get rid of him. He immediately turned around and made an escape posture to the left. But when he just took 1 or 2 steps, his body suddenly changed and rushed to the opposite right. The black-robed youth just tilted his left wing and was ready to chase, but he didn't expect Dean to change direction. In such a short distance and such a high speed, it was almost impossible for him to change direction quickly, especially in the case of Aisha's pursuit. If he wanted to change direction to catch up with Dean, he could only slow down. Damn it! He gritted his teeth and didn't slow down. Instead, he continued to flank and flew toward Dean, who was running to the right. But because he didn't slow down when he flew to the right, he was a little unable to stop. He took a big arc, and Dean ran in the opposite direction with him. This back and forth made the distance between the two even bigger. When the black-robed youth turned around and looked, he saw that Dean had appeared behind Aisha. And the distance between Aisha and Aisha, which was previously kicked by him, had been narrowed at this moment. Roar! Aisha's face was full of killing intent. This killing intent seemed to be projected from her eye sockets. It was unknown whether the killing intent was too crazy or other reasons. On her forehead, where the scales were lighter, there was a bump slowly bulging. This bump grew sharper and sharper, turning into a black horn. The black-robed youth was entangled by Aisha. He was very angry. His dark red wings rotated and slid in a curve, trying to get rid of Aisha. He knew the weakness of the corpse king, which was low intelligence. Although the latter's speed and strength were better than him, his odds of winning were still very high. However, he was worried that Dean could control this corpse king to carry out complex combat attacks. In that case, he would not be facing an unconscious corpse king. Whoosh! Suddenly, a cold arrow shot towards him. Chapter 756. You're courting death. The black-robed teenager was furious. He failed to chase Dean, so he planned to get rid of the corpse king first. The result was good. The latter even shot an arrow to interfere with him. He gritted his teeth and suppressed his anger. He flew in a snake-like curve to increase the distance. Aisha was swayed left and right by his swaying figure. She always missed, but she still followed closely behind him because she was faster than him. Dean saw the intention of this person. He looked dignified. This was the first time he fought with a peak inner desolate level master. The latter's adaptability was stronger than he imagined. Although Aisha could defeat him in a head-on fight, she lacked flexibility. He raised his hand and continued to shoot at the opponent. In addition to blocking his route of action, it was more important to provoke him. The black-robed teenager was vigilant this time. He avoided Dean's cold arrow and continued to fly in a snake shape. But the arc was slowly approaching Dean's direction. Dean still shot an arrow and moved slowly to form a pincer position with Aisha. If he wanted to attack Dean, he would be caught by Aisha. Such a result was not what the opponent wanted to face. After all, once Aisha bit him, he would die. The black-robed teenager flew left and right at full speed. Looking at Dean's position, he was angry. He wanted to kill Dean with his eyes. He clenched his teeth and continued to dodge Aisha. At the same time, he approached Dean, ready to break his route and prevent him from getting close to Aisha. Whoosh! Suddenly, a whistling sound came from behind. The black-robed youth was shocked. He suddenly dodged sideways without turning his head. A strange hand grabbed him from his side, but he could see clearly from the corner of his eyes that Aisha, who had been pulled away from him, had unexpectedly caught up to him without him noticing. His heart tightened. He hurriedly flew in a large snake shape again. However, this time Aisha's figure was inseparable from him. She was like a shadow attached to his body. She firmly grasped the distance and followed him in the same snake shape. Her limbs looked much more flexible than before. Not good. The black-robed youngster suddenly realized that the King of Corpses was slowly adapting to the body. In the pursuit, it stimulated the subconscious ability of the original owner of the body. It must be known that the King of Corpses was different from the Walking Dead. The difference was not only the disparity in strength and deterrence of other Walking Dead. More importantly, the King of Corpses could stimulate part of the physical potential of the original owner and display the physical fighting skills of the original owner. This was the most terrifying aspect of the Zombie King. This kid is delaying things on purpose. No, I must leave immediately. The black-robed youth saw the Corpse King firmly behind him. He glanced at Dean, who was shooting an arrow at him in the distance. His eyes almost spurted fire. The strong, killing intent made him resentful, but he knew that he must swallow this anger now and leave immediately. Otherwise, when the Corpse King's fighting potential was restored more and more, it would be more difficult for him to escape. He was decisive and immediately flew up without looking back, ignoring Dean. Aisha's figure also rose as he flew away. She followed closely behind him and quickly approached him. The black-robed youth's figure instantly twisted, flew forward parallel, and then fell at an extremely fast speed. Aisha, who was following him, seemed to have expected it. She was not misled by his rapid change of direction. She flew forward parallel at an extremely fast speed and then fell rapidly. The route was almost exactly the same. Whoosh! Several strange claws on Aisha's back quickly rushed out and grabbed the tail behind the black-robed youth. The black-robed youth felt the terrifying aura firmly locked behind him. His face was ugly. He swung his tail quickly and hit the strange limbs that Aisha stretched out. But the strange limbs on Aisha's back were extremely flexible, no longer as stiff as before. Two of the strange limbs shook the black-robed youth's tail head-on, and the other strange limb suddenly stabbed like a sharp knife, instantly hitting the black-robed youth's tail. The claws of the strange limb were like barbs, firmly clasping his tail. The other strange limbs immediately climbed up his tail, narrowing the distance. The black-robed youth turned pale with fright. He suddenly let out a low roar, and with a ripping sound, his tail suddenly broke off from the root. After losing his tail, he sprinted forward for a short distance, but his speed quickly decreased. Without the balance control of his tail, it was difficult for him to display the previous flexible snake flight. Whoosh! A sharp arrow suddenly shot from the front. The black-robed youth's face changed, and he dodged to the side. The suppressed anger in his heart instantly jumped up, but at this moment, a cold, killing intent enveloped him from behind. It was like a black haze had turned into a blood basin mouth, and it seemed that it could swallow him at any time. His anger disappeared in an instant, and his face turned pale. He mustered all his strength and rushed forward desperately. At the same time, he took out a strange stone from his arms. There were many small holes on the stone. He aimed at one of the holes, and suddenly a ripple-like whining sound came out. The sound was not loud, but it was very distant. Dean was surprised when he saw his actions. Is he calling for help? Just as he was thinking about it, a rumbling sound came from thousands of meters away, and the ground beneath his feet started to shake. The next moment, he saw a black mountain-like sphere rising from the ground, rolling over quickly like a black hole, crushing all the weeds and broken walls in its path. It was the black earth he had seen before, and it was the huge black hell. It turns out that the black prison outside the giant wall belongs to them. Such a thought emerged in Dean's mind. The next moment, he suddenly remembered the appearance of Aisha being locked by the black prison. His face changed, and he immediately touched the bag behind his back. Soon, he touched the match. His heart settled, and he glanced around. The most thing in the hunting area outside the giant wall seemed to be weeds. He immediately found a withered yellow weed and rubbed the match to ignite it. The ground rumbled and slightly trembled. Finally, the match ignited a few withered yellow weeds. He twisted the weeds into a ball and stretched it into the grass next to him. Soon, the flame gradually burned the growing weeds, and the flame slowly covered more weeds. The black-robed youth felt the heat, and suddenly his pupils shrank, and he almost cried out. At this moment, he suddenly felt a sharp pain on his back, as if he had been stabbed by a few sharp knives. He looked back and saw a ferocious face full of murderous intent coming towards him. He hurriedly flapped his wings, and 2 daggers suddenly grew out of the flesh on his palms. These daggers seemed to be a part of his body. He quickly waved the daggers to counterattack, but the next moment, a few black shadows flashed, and with a few clanging sounds, the daggers in his hands were knocked away. Chapter 757. 1 Inch Impossible. The black-robed youth was horrified. Looking at the strange claws that came again, he roared and waved the dagger to stab Aisha's forehead. In the case that he couldn't avoid it, he could only meet it. Even if he was injured, he could kill the corpse king. As for Dean on the other side, he believed that even if he dragged his seriously injured body, he could kill him. Whoosh! At this moment, one of the monstrous claws suddenly changed direction and circled to the front of his dagger in an extremely crafty manner. She slapped it with her palm. Her palm was pierced by the dagger, but her palm did not feel any pain. She tightly held onto the black-robed youth's palm. The black-robed youth was scared out of his wits. He hurriedly broke free, but his palm was firmly covered. He looked at Aisha, who was slowly approaching. The latter's dark eyes seemed to flash with cold, killing intent. She was like a ghost crawling out of hell. He had an illusion that this wasn't a mindless corpse king. There seemed to be a fierce and cruel soul hidden in this body. Yes, at this moment, he felt that this corpse king had evolved wisdom. Just from knowing how to defend, it could be seen that. Dean, who was standing on the ground in the distance, saw the black-robed youth's move. His heart was in his throat, but the next moment he was stunned. Aisha actually knew defense? Could it be that she had regained consciousness? He stared blankly, even forgetting to shoot an arrow to attack. With 2 swishing sounds, the strange claws on Aisha's back suddenly turned, drawing a black light like a poisonous python, instantly penetrating the black-robed youth's chest and stabbing out from his back. It looked like a few claws grew out of his back. These palms were pale, like the claws of a ghost, gloomy and terrifying. The black-robed youth's chest was pierced, and his body suddenly froze. When he barely mustered his strength to push desperately, there was a burst of tearing feeling in his chest. The next moment, his consciousness instantly turned dark. With a puff, a rain of blood swirled in midair. The black-robed youth's body was torn into several pieces and was caught by the strange claws. Aisha lowered her head. Her wings were slightly curled as she hugged her body. She was like a huge black sphere suspended in midair. She slowly descended and stood on the ground. Dean could hear the sound of bones breaking coming from the black sphere. His face suddenly changed, and the hope that rose in his heart was once again extinguished. His palms trembled slightly. He raised his arm and gently shook the bell. When he rang the bell, there was an inexplicable fear in his heart. He was worried that he would lose control of the command, worried that she would never return to his side. He suddenly felt very regretful. He would rather not have come here and not have met this black-robed youth. The sound of chewing disappeared as the bell rang. But it didn't return to Dean's side as ordered. Instead, it fell into dead silence. After a long time, Dean was awakened by the sound next to him. He turned his head and saw that the menacing dark prison had stopped outside the burning weeds. It seemed to be afraid of the heat of the flames. But it hesitated and didn't leave immediately. It just rolled in the same place and pressed a deep pit on the ground. Dean took a glance and then retracted his gaze. He was not in the mood to pay attention to the dark prison. He only hoped that Aisha would be safe and return to his side again. He stopped in the same place and looked at her. He didn't dare to approach her. There was a faint trace of fear in his heart. After a long time, the wings of the dragon slowly stretched out and revealed Aisha's figure. She was like a lonely dragon standing with her back towards Dean. Severed limbs and heads were scattered on the ground at her feet. Dean's heart almost stopped beating as he stared at Aisha. The next moment, Aisha slowly turned around and walked towards Dean step by step. Dean felt an inexplicable throbbing in his heart as he looked at the terrifying figure coming towards him. He had a feeling that something had happened in Aisha's body. Her temperament seemed to be different from before. It seemed that there was more tyrannical hostility in her. She was no longer as peaceful as before. He slightly raised his hand and used the bell to issue a stop command. Aisha immediately stopped and quietly looked at Dean. But her dark eyes were no longer as empty as before. It seemed like she was staring at Dean seriously. However, her eyes were by no means calm. There was a kind of hidden evil in them. Dean looked at her eyes and suddenly felt that the distance between him and her had become more distant. He was slightly silent and slowly approached her. His heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably as he got closer. A burst of oppressive, killing aura stood in front of him like a towering mountain. It made him breathless. He took out a handkerchief and raised his hand to gently wipe the blood on her lips. Aisha didn't move and quietly looked at him. But the murderous aura on her body seemed to be slowly calming down like a violent hurricane. Dean was relieved to see that she didn't make a move. But there was some pain in his heart when he saw that she was still maintaining her demonic form. He had been worried that it would be difficult for her to restore her human appearance after using her full strength. He didn't expect that such a situation would occur in this battle. Sure enough, luck didn't favor him. He always encountered the worst probability. He silently looked at her for a while. After calming down, he turned to look at the wandering dark prison in the distance. "Wait for me here for a while," he said to Aisha while shaking the bell. Aisha didn't respond, but her head seemed to slightly tilt. Dean didn't think much about it. He uprooted the burning weeds and rushed towards the dark prison. The dark prison seemed to be scared when it saw Dean approaching with the flame. It immediately turned around and rolled away. Dean spread his wings and soon caught up with it. Although the structure of the dark prison was strange and could seal a strong person like Aisha, but its movement was slow. It would be fine as long as he didn't fight it in close combat. Dean used his body to protect the burning weeds as he moved closer to Black Prison. The dark prison made a sharp cry and shot out several black limbs from its ball-like body towards Dean. Dean's figure flashed to avoid the tentacle's attack. He held the burning grass and rushed towards the dark prison. The flame instantly ignited the dark prison's body. The dark prison's body issued a harsh scream. Dean saw the flame burning on the dark prison's body and hurriedly turned around and flew away. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion was heard. Dudian's back was hit by a boulder that weighed thousands of pounds. His body was pushed forward and fell uncontrollably to the ground. His face rubbed against the sand and was buried in the soil. He coughed and crawled up from the ground. He felt as though the ribs in his chest had been broken and there was a burning pain. He turned around and saw that Black Prison had already disappeared. In its place was a huge crater from the explosion, and there were black chunks of fat scattered around it. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw a faint figure emitting heat appear in the bushes several hundred meters to his left. Chapter 758. One whoosh. Dean's figure flashed and rushed to the front of the figure. He saw that it was a young girl of 17 or 18 years old, wearing a green armor. The chromium plating on the surface of the armor was corroded and faded. She was lying motionless on the ground, seemingly in a coma. Dean would never forget this face. He didn't expect to meet Hathaway here. Moreover, she was seriously injured and in a coma. He understood why there was such a strong smell here. It turned out that she had come here earlier and fought with the black-robed youth, but was swallowed by the black prison. Looking at her cheeks, covered in unknown mucus, his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He did not approach her directly, but controlled the sharp blade-like limbs on his back to shoot out. With a few swishing sounds, they pierced through her wrists and knees. Two of the blade-like limbs were pressed against her throat and chest at the same time, where her heart was. As long as she made the slightest movement, they would immediately pierce into her. Her arms and knees were hit hard. Hathaway seemed to wake up from the pain. She frowned slightly and slowly opened her eyes. Dean saw that her consciousness had recovered. Without stopping, several sharp blade limbs suddenly flew and cut off her pierced arms and knees. Blood suddenly sputtered, and Hathaway's body instantly lost her limbs. At this time, Hathaway had completely woken up from the pain. Her eyes were wide open, and there was a trace of horror in them. When she saw Dean in front of her, she suddenly froze. There was a trace of astonishment on her face, but the next moment, she saw her limbs were cut off. Her brain suddenly buzzed and went blank. "You didn't expect to meet me here, right?" Dean's face was full of killing intent and sadistic pleasure. He said word by word, "You were lucky to escape last time, but God won't always care for you." Hathaway woke up and looked around. She soon saw that this was still the wilderness outside the giant wall. Behind Dean, she could still see the towering giant wall and the indelible figure standing in the distance. She was startled and her mind was in chaos. Although there was a sharp pain in her limbs, what made her more afraid was that she was facing Dean without any resistance. Facing this youth who had crazy hatred and killing intent for her. She knew what would happen if she fell into her hands, but her current situation was so bad that it couldn't get any worse. There was no possibility of turning the situation around. Dean grinned when he saw her gnashing her teeth. The blade-like limbs on his back danced quickly, and Hathaway's armor was immediately peeled off and thrown dozens of meters away by the blade-like limbs. In the blink of an eye, Hathaway was naked, lying on the grass like a white lamb. Every secret part of her body was exposed. There was a trace of panic in Hathaway's eyes, but she quickly restored her coldness. If there was anything that could make her persist, it would be that she would never show a humble, begging posture in front of Dean. She knew that even if she did that, she would not be able to get the youth's forgiveness. That kind of hatred could only be resolved by killing. "Even if you kill me, you won't be able to get my sister. She has already become a corpse king and will never return." Hathaway looked at Dean coldly. Although she was lying on the ground, her chin was slightly raised as if she was looking down at Dean. These words pierced Dean's heart like a sharp awl. He roared fiercely and threw a blade-like limb on her cheek, immediately cutting a bloody wound. "Shut up, bitch!" He roared angrily, and blue veins bulged on his neck. "Kill me if you have the ability, humble man. Look at your ugly face. Even if my sister didn't become a corpse king, she wouldn't look at a man like you." Hathaway endured the pain from her face and limbs. The excessive blood loss made her feel cold, but she still looked at Dean proudly and mocked. "You are a loser. Do you think that my sister is good to you because she likes you? You don't look in the mirror to see what you look like. In terms of appearance, there are many people who are 100 times more handsome than you. In terms of ability, there are countless people who are stronger than you. Which part of you is worthy of my sister's attention? She just thinks of you as a clown, a humble pariah outside the giant wall." Dean's blade-like limb pierced her shoulder. The sharp pain suddenly interrupted Hathaway's words. Dean's face was distorted, almost inhuman. He looked at her ferociously and said word by word, "You don't deserve to mention her. You don't deserve it. You don't deserve it." Hathaway twitched in pain, but still clenched her teeth and fought back. Dean's eyes protruded, and he looked terrible. He suddenly laughed, incomparably ferocious. "You like to talk, right? Can you still talk without a tongue?" His sharp blade-like limbs reached for Hathaway's mouth and pierced in her lips. The sharp blade-like blade cut opened her tightly closed lips, and blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. Hathaway clenched the sharp blade with her teeth, and there was a trace of horror in her eyes that were full of mockery. Dean grinned. "This is just the beginning. This time you won't have that kind of luck. I will let you inflict the pain on me and her back 100 times. Hathaway clenched her teeth and didn't dare to open her mouth. Dean didn't really intend to cut her tongue. He was still hoping to get some secrets of the dragon family and other Witcher families from her mouth. He retracted the sharp blade, but still put it on her chin. If I hear you speak ill of your sister again, I will cut off your tongue piece by piece and then feed it to the dogs. I will let your tongue have intimate contact with the wild dogs. Hathaway's face changed. Although she could bear the pain of her tongue being cut, but Dean's words made her heart throb. She had a nauseous feeling of vomiting as she thought of her tongue being eaten by a wild dog. Lowly pariah, a pariah like you who has done all kinds of bad things will die. Hathaway gritted her teeth. Dean gently grinned and stretched out his scythe-like arm to cut her snow-white body. Tell me, if I tie you up and throw you into the most prosperous and lively king's city, or throw you into the hands of the dragon family, what will happen? Hathaway's complexion changed. This was something she absolutely could not endure. It would be more painful than death. However, she knew that she could not cower. She sneered and said, "Despicable lowly commoner, your mind is only filled with these filthy things. Don't you want to fuck me? Come on, do it in front of my sister. I want to see if you have the face to do such a thing that is worse than an animal." Chapter 759. 1 inch, that's a bad excuse. You said so much, but in the end you still want to do those dirty things. Untouchables are untouchables. Hathaway raised her chin slightly and looked at Dean mockingly. As long as you are shameless enough to do such a thing in front of my sister, then you can come. You really think highly of yourself. Dean smiled coldly. I will let the untouchables come to you. The outer wall lacks everything but untouchables. Don't you always say untouchables? You will spend the rest of your life to serve these untouchables. You. Hathaway was slightly angry. She obviously underestimated Dean's sinister means. She would rather die if she was touched by those filthy pariahs. For a saint's identity, you are framing your sister. Dean pierced her shoulder blade and lifted her body. I won't let you die so easily. I will let you see me ascend to the supreme position of the wall. I will make you never be able to turn over. If I have the power to go to hell, then, even if you die, I will hunt you down and torture you forever. Hathaway slightly gritted her teeth in pain. She reluctantly looked at Dean and squeezed out a mocking smile. Wishful thinking. Dean gently grinned, but didn't say anything. His pupils entered the X-ray state. The sharp blades on his back danced like a few tails dancing. Hathaway's body was cut open. The wounds were shallow, so there wasn't much blood seeping out. But in Dean's vision, Hathaway's joints and meridians were all cut off. It was as if she had undergone a precise surgery. She had completely become a waste. There was no possibility for her to escape by herself. When he let Hathaway escape the last time, he had made up his mind that he would never give her a chance to escape when he caught her again. But this time, it was as if the heavens were looking out for him. She was heavily injured and unconscious, allowing him to capture her effortlessly. You won't die a good death. Hathaway's body was crippled. She didn't finish her words as she fainted. Dean threw her body to the side. He picked up her hands and feet and wrapped them in her clothes. Then he went to the place where the black prison exploded. He looked around and found several pieces of meat. He wrapped them in his clothes. He wanted to bring them back to Poland and Siamanson. He wanted to see if they could learn something from it, so that the 3 little black prisons could grow up quickly. He had seen the ability of dark prison many times. Even a strong physique of Aisha could be swallowed by it. Judging from the corroded chrome on Haley's armor, dark prison had a terrifying digestive ability. Dean couldn't think of any other way to deal with this thing besides using flames to attack it. He felt that even the most unfathomable dragon mother would be swallowed and digested to death in close combat with dark prison. It's a pity that this person is dead. I couldn't get the secret of their departure. Dean flew to a high place and looked around, but he didn't see any strong heat source. He didn't see any other black prison or the wyvern that he had guessed. Is it possible that the dragon lives in the sky? Dean looked up at the sky. The white clouds were thick, and the blue was particularly beautiful. He frowned. The black-robed teenager didn't summon the dragon until he was killed. Was it because he died too fast and didn't have time to react? Or did he know that he wouldn't be able to escape death even if the dragon came, so he didn't summon it? Or could it be that their method of crossing over wasn't by riding a wyvern at all? Dean sighed in his heart. If the black-robed youth was still alive, then he would be able to get many secrets from him. For example, where did they come from? What was the scale of the kingdom of God? Were there any other giant wall besides Sylvia? How many were there? Why did they snatch the body of Sylvia's god of war? It seems that I have to find a way to find out from the mouths of the remaining people. Dean shook his head and felt regret. He landed on the ground and picked up the torn limbs of the black-robed teenager. He rolled them into his clothes and wrapped them up. Then he hugged Aisha and Hathaway with his tail and flew to the giant wall. He was still thinking on the way back to the giant wall. When he passed by the giant wall, he immediately changed direction and flew towards the outer wall area. Half an hour later, he returned to Utopia Mountain. He sent Aisha to the temple and then asked Noyce to call Riley. Riley lived on the mountain. His job was to teach Aurora how to use the sword. His days were quite easy. He came to the temple and saw Haley, who had no limbs, on the ground. His face slightly changed. He felt that every time he came to see Dean, he would have a feeling of fear. He bowed. Riley greets Master. There is something I need you to do. Dean threw a silk handkerchief to him. Go to the west side of the giant wall, 30 miles north of the wall. Wait for someone there. Wait for someone. Riley took the handkerchief and saw that there was something wrapped inside. He opened it and saw a severed finger. There will be a group of powerful people in the next few days. They will see you and ask you what happened there. You tell them that if they want to know where the owner of the finger is, then they will have to kill all the masters in the inner wall who are above the wilderness level. Riley was startled. He now knew the concept of the wilderness level. Dudian clearly wanted to use the hands of this group of people to clear the obstacles for him. At the same time, he was aware of the danger he was going to deal with. The owner of the finger must have an extraordinary relationship with this group of people. If this group of people saw the finger and got angry, it was likely that they would kill him on the spot. He knew that he had no choice but to bow his head. This group of people may not go there. Dean saw Riley's worry, but he didn't point it out. He calmly said, "Even if you go, they won't embarrass you as long as you open your mouth. Come back after 5 days if you don't meet anyone." "I see." Riley let out a sigh of relief and left respectfully. Dean asked Noyce to take Haley to the dungeon after Riley left. He asked about the situation in the inner wall. However, his intelligence network wasn't efficient as he didn't have the latest news. He didn't have much hope, so he got up and went to the inner wall again. He didn't bring Haley this time, as he felt that she would lose control if she fought with all her strength. Chapter 760. One Inner Wall. The Padgel Mountains. Everyone had already set up their tents on the hillside. Among them, the brightest color was the golden royal tent. Yulida was sitting in the seat of honor. Her small face was filled with anger. "These devil families are just like what my father said. They are unreliable. The situation is so urgent, but they still don't want to use their full strength. Do they really think that I don't know what they are thinking? Your Majesty, you have to calm down," a white-bearded old man said. "They don't want to go because they suspect that the god's corpse isn't real. They want to know the location of the god's corpse from your Majesty's mouth. The danger will be greater if they know. What's real? It's real." Eureka's eyes flashed as she angrily rebuked. The white-bearded old man hurriedly replied, "Yes, your Majesty. Do you want to use the king's seal to order them to go all out? They may not fight with all their strength, even if we force them to go all out." Eureka glanced at him. "Don't worry, your highness. They had 9 people in the beginning, but now they've lost 3 people, leaving only 6. Although they're all inner desolate level experts like me, we have enough people here to keep them here," said Yamos from his seat below the tent. Eureka's eyes were deep. "Who knows if they have someone outside to help them? Haven't you ever considered how they managed to cross over from the abyss? Although we can be sure that they don't have any abyssal walker, but they must have some special means to get here. Moreover, they should know that my father has left the giant wall and is going to the kingdom of God. Your Majesty's meaning is they should have cards up their sleeves that we don't know about. Don't think things are too simple. Eureka continued. If we can't resolve the battle as soon as possible, then it won't be a good thing, even though this is our home ground. Everyone in the tent looked at each other in dismay. Eureka summoned the strongest of the three devil families, Magistrate and the three devil families, to a meeting after half an hour. She asked, "Everyone, have you thought of a way to recapture the god's coffin after such a long time? Your Majesty, don't be impatient. This matter can't be rushed." A man with a tortoise-shell medal calmly replied, "We have arranged a cordon around the perimeter. They won't be able to escape." Eureka's eyes were cold as she stared at him. "Is that so? However, I hope that you can understand that once the sacred remains are destroyed, we will all be buried with them." Now that the divine casket was in their hands, the longer they delayed, the more likely it would be destroyed. If they knew that they couldn't escape and were in complete despair, it was more likely that they would destroy the god's corpse. "Do you really want to bet?" When she said the last sentence, her meaning was clear. Hearing her words, everyone's expression changed slightly. The meaning behind her words was extremely clear. The muscular man slightly frowned. There was a trace of displeasure on his face. With his identity, even if Eureka was the only daughter of the Wall Lord, she shouldn't talk to him with such an attitude. After all, he was also an elder. But at the moment, everyone was present, so he couldn't blame her on the spot. So he asked in a deep voice, "In that case, does your Highness have any ideas? Or do you think that we will be able to take back the divine coffin if we charge forward together?" Eureka's eyes were as sharp as swords. Her young face was filled with determination. She didn't show the slightest hint of fear. She said word by word, "We can't just charge forward, and we can't just sit here and wait for death. I've already thought of an idea. We will take turns to send people to fight. We won't attack by force. We will just exhaust them. Since they are all severely injured, we can't afford to give them time to recover. We will wait until they are exhausted. Then we will charge forward and take back the divine coffin." "Your Highness, that is a good idea," Dragon Mother, who was wearing a gorgeous robe, said with a faint smile. "I agree. The longer the divine coffin is in their hands, the more variables there will be. Also, I think that they have other tricks up their sleeves. We need to solve them as soon as possible." Eureka glanced at her and nodded. "Dragon Mother, you are indeed smart." The muscular man slightly raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. He didn't say anything and just said indifferently, "In that case, let's do it. Since it has been decided, then let's prepare for the first round of battle as soon as possible." The old man wearing a monastic robe said. The Padgel Mountains gradually appeared at the end of his field of vision. It was getting clearer and clearer. Looking down from the sky, it was an uneven mountain range with 7 or 8 big and small hills. He slowly lowered his body, converged his breath, suppressed the heat in his body, and slowly landed on the grassland. He folded his wings and quietly groped his way. When he got close to the mountain range, he quickly saw a large number of heat source figures gathered on a tall mountain. Every heat source figure seemed to be a powerhouse who had pioneered the land. Among them, there were many figures that were as hot as the sun. They were stronger than Hero and Ronan, who he had seen before. They were on the same level as Hathaway. It seems that most of the masters of the inner wall have gathered here. I didn't expect there to be so many of them. There are 20 or 30 pioneers. Dadian thought in his heart. This force was stronger than he had expected. He suddenly felt grateful to these invaders. No matter what their purpose was, at least they had drawn out the hidden forces of the inner wall for him. Moreover, they would consume a lot of pioneers for him. Dean didn't continue to approach. He lurked in the soil and eliminated all the smell and heat. If a battle broke out in the mountains, he would be able to observe it. Time passed little by little. Dean observed more hidden figures. He noted all of them down, but there were some doubts in his heart. There are 7 strong people in the inner wilderness, 38 ordinary pioneers, and 12 people who are at the peak of the outer wilderness like Hero. How could such a strong force stay here and not attack? There are only 6 enemies. It is reasonable to say that they can encircle all of them with a frontal attack. What are they waiting for? Is it because of internal disunity? Or is there something in the enemy's hand that makes them worry? Is it the Immortal's corpse? But the Immortal's corpse is dead. Are they worried that they will destroy it? What is hidden in the Immortal's corpse? Do these invaders want to extract the cells of the Immortal's corpse to do experiments? But if the Immortal's corpse can be used for experiments, why is there no Immortal's corpse in their homeland? Moreover, the giant wall has preserved the Immortal's corpse for so many years. Didn't they think of this? Or is it that the purpose of taking the Immortal's corpse is not for research, but for other purposes? In that case, what will happen if the Immortal's corpse is destroyed? Dean's heart was full of doubts. Although he couldn't guess it, at least he was sure that the Immortal's corpse should be closely related to the safety of the giant wall. The reason was very simple. If it was not related to the interests of the entire giant wall, why would the 3 major families, the monastery, and the magistrate come first? Why did they bring so many strong people? It must be known that the strength of the enemy wasn't weak. Going to stop them would mean casualties. Once the families didn't go, they would preserve their strength. But at this moment, they didn't fight against each other. Instead, they all came. This could only mean that once the Immortal's corpse was taken away, the entire giant wall would have a big event. This event was likely to be related to the interests of all forces. However, he couldn't figure out how a corpse that had been dead for so long could create such a big event. It seems that no matter what, I can't let these invaders take away the Immortal's corpse. Otherwise, I will also suffer, Dean thought in his heart. After a while, he saw that these people still didn't take action. He couldn't help but frown. From their performance, it could be seen that the Immortal's corpse was extremely important. But now they surrounded the enemy here and didn't attack. Was it just because they were afraid that the enemy would destroy the Immortal's corpse? If this was the reason, then they could send some people to pretend to attack, and some people to contain the enemy. Or they could send people to disturb the enemy and not give them time to breathe. What the hell are these bastards doing? He was a little anxious. Half an hour later, Dean finally saw these people move. Among the 7 inner desolate level heat sources, 5 of them took 8 outer desolate level pioneers and 10 ordinary pioneers away from the mountain and rushed into the cliff valley in front of them. Under the cliff valley, 6 heat sources were motionless and seemed to be resting. The intensity of their heat sources was different. Some of the heat sources were extremely weak, similar to the hunters. Obviously, they were deliberately suppressing it, or they were seriously injured. Soon, Dean saw the 2 sides fighting fiercely. On the mountain, there were many pioneers surrounding them. Among them, 2 inner desolate level powerhouses who didn't participate in the battle stood on both sides of the cliff valley and didn't participate in the battle. Dean immediately saw their plan. Obviously, they intended to consume the enemy's energy instead of attacking. Finally, they made their move. Dean was relieved. Looking at the situation, their idea was similar to his. They intended to consume the enemy's energy and then attack in one go. The fierce battle lasted for more than 10 minutes. 4 ordinary pioneers were beheaded, 1 peak pioneer of the outer desolate level was killed, and the rest were injured. The 5 inner desolate level powerhouses also retreated. Although the 6 invaders in the cliff valley were not killed, most of them were injured. Through the observation of the heat sources, he noticed that only 5 of the 6 invaders had joined the battle. The weakest heat source was most likely too heavily injured. However, the other 5 people were protecting him, so he didn't get injured again. From this point of view, these invaders were obviously comrades who had been fighting together for a long time. They were not a temporary team. Otherwise, they wouldn't have such deep feelings for each other. After the first round of battle, less than half an hour later, the 5 people once again led the same number of pioneers into the cliff valley. The fierce battle broke out again. In the cliff valley, the hunchbacked old man was sitting on the divine coffin. The green color on his face had faded a lot. His cheeks had returned to normal, but there was still a touch of green on his lips. Fatty and the graceful woman were protecting him on both sides. They were fighting fiercely. The enemies kept rushing in front of them, trying to rob the divine coffin they were guarding. The battle ended after 4 or 5 minutes. Fatty looked at the retreating enemies and sat down on the ground. He was so tired that he was gasping for breath. At the same time, he chewed and swallowed a pioneer's arm to recover his strength. The rest of the people were sweating. They couldn't be compared to Fatty. Fatty could eat to recover his strength, but they needed to rest and rest. Those bastards didn't even use their full strength. They purposely consumed our strength. I can't hold on anymore. The strong man, who was the fourth in the line, covered the sword wound on his chest and said with a grimace. The graceful woman leaned on the divine coffin and panted. She said, "They are probably worried that we will destroy the divine coffin and die with them. Big Brother's poison is about to be cured. When Big Brother recovers, it will be the time for all of them to die. How about we call Shao-Chi over? With him, we can buy some time. When Big Brother recovers, everything will be fine. This won't do. If anything happens to Shao-Chi, we'll be finished. I'll call Black Prison over." Fatty saw that everyone was exhausted. He hesitated for a moment and stood up. "Black Prison is slow. Can we make it in time? We should have brought Black Prison with us from the beginning. We underestimated those bastards." Fatty didn't say anything. He reached into his stomach. His palm easily sank into his stomach like a swamp. Soon he took out a stone. There were many small holes on the stone. If Dean saw it, he would recognize it. It was the same stone that the black-robed teenager used to summon Black Prison. He aimed his mouth at the biggest hole and blew. A strange melodious sound came out. Seeing the fatty's action and hearing the weird flute sound, the pioneers who were guarding the valley changed their faces at once. Someone immediately returned to the campsite to report. Soon, Eureka, Dragon Mother, and the others arrived at the edge of the valley. They looked surprised. Are they going to call for help? Sure enough, there are more than 9 of them. What should we do now? Immediately send someone to guard the mountain. It's best if it's the winged family. Eureka was the first to respond. Although we don't know what they're calling for, the sound of the flute shouldn't be able to travel too far. The thing they're calling for might be nearby, or it might be something with special hearing abilities. We can intercept and kill the thing that's helping them. No problem. The slender, hook-nosed, middle-aged man nodded. He turned around and left. He called his clansmen to set up a defense line. Outside the mountain, in the soil, Dean also heard the strange flute sound. His face changed. He immediately thought of Black Prison. These people wanted to summon Black Prison to save them, but he had already killed Black Prison, including the previous one. He had killed a total of 2 Black Prison. He didn't find a second one around the black-robed teenager. Could it be that Black Prison was hidden somewhere else? At this time, he saw a group of pioneers leaving the mountain. They were running towards the outside of the mountain. He immediately guessed their intention. They should be preparing to intercept the Black Prison summoned by the invaders. Chapter 761. One whoosh. Dean flew out of the Padgel Mountains and flew straight in one direction. Along the way, he passed through a quarantined city. The flames of war were everywhere, and groups of undeads could be seen wandering in the streets. Some cities had been cleaned by the army, and the buildings were broken and messy. Some were still like dead cities, and occasionally he could see some huge monsters sleeping on the streets of the city. Dean silently watched this scene from the sky. He didn't stop and flew all the way to the Rock family's territory, which was the furthest away from the Padgel Mountains. Although he hated the Dragon family the most among the 3 devil families, the Dragon family was relatively close to the Padgel Mountains. If he fought in the Dragon family's territory, the Dragon Mother and other Dragon family's powerhouses in the Padgel Mountains would inevitably come to support him in time. 2 hours later, he came to the Rock family's territory. This was a city in a remote location, and there were not many nobles living in it. Most of the nobles didn't want to get involved with the Devil family. Although there had been an outbreak of corpses, order had been restored in the city. However, it was still sparsely populated, and most of the houses were closed. On the city wall, patrolling soldiers were heavily guarded. "Let's start with you," Dean said in his heart. He sneaked into the city and went all the way to a magnificent building in the center of the city. Most of the buildings were decorated with tortoise shell-shaped flags of the Rock Clan, fluttering in the wind. Dean lurked outside the building and observed the heat sources in each building. Soon he saw a total of 3 Pioneer-level powerhouses sitting inside. 2 of them were strong, and both were at the War God level. I didn't expect that there would be so many powerhouses gathered in the Pagel Mountains, and there were still 5 Pioneers left in their lair, and 2 of them were at the peak of the outer wilderness. Dean's eyes flashed. The heritage of this devil family was really unfathomable. However, now they were in the light, and he was in the dark. It was not impossible to fight against 5 Pioneers, as long as there were no inner wilderness-level powerhouses hiding inside. He pondered for a moment and decided to take the risk. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to wear down the enemy's strength. If he succeeded, he would be able to harvest a lot of God's marrow. With the resources of the House of Exorcist, the amount of God's marrow stored was several times more than that of a monster research institute. It was enough for him to break through to the inner desolate level. It could even increase the strength of Sergei and Noyce. After all, he was a commander without an army. Although Noyce and the others could help him, they were too weak to do many things. Let's sneak attack one of the Outer Wasteland's peak experts first. The remaining 4 will be easy to deal with. Dean's eyes flashed. Even if he couldn't beat them, at least he could retreat. He expected that they wouldn't go all out to chase him. After making up his mind, he restrained his aura, controlled the heat in his body, and slowly sneaked over. At the same time, when Dean arrived at the territory of the Rock family, Yulita, Dragon Mother, and the others launched another attack in the valley of the Pagel Mountains. This was the 6th round of attack. Dragon Mother, along with the brawny Rock family, the hook-nosed middle-aged man from the Wing family, the old missionary from the monastery, and Yamos, the 4 inner desolation-level masters, joined the battle. In addition, there were more than 10 pioneers interfering from the side. Although these pioneers couldn't compete with the inner desolate-level masters, some of them had special abilities. They could help from a distance and interfere with the 6 people in the valley. After fighting for so long, the 6 people in the valley were exhausted, or, to be more exact, the Fatso and the other 4 were exhausted. They stayed by the old man's side, not allowing Dragon Mother and the other 4 people to approach the old man. However, Dragon Mother and the others saw through their purpose. They deliberately pretended to attack the stooped old man many times, but they used their killing moves to attack the people who came to stop them. This made them even more injured. Whoosh! Dragon Mother held her sword and attacked the graceful woman. Her demonic body was a huge black dragon. Spikes protruded from her dragon tail, and the edges of the black dragon wings on her back were snow white. They looked like some kind of crystal. When they collided with the wings, the sound of metal colliding could be heard. Dragon Mother's arms were still in the shape of a human. She didn't activate her demonic body to the fullest, but maintaining this state made her fight more agile. The 2 dragon swords in her hands were almost 3 meters long. She forced the graceful woman to stand in front of the divine coffin. The graceful woman looked like both a crocodile and a snake. Her lower body was a forked snake tail, and sharp spikes protruded from her back. The rest of her skin was covered in lumpy cuticles, which were extremely tough. The scales on her tail were colorful, dazzling the audience. Her weapon was also a long sword. The hilt of the sword was coiled around her wrist, as if she was fencing. She moved her sword swiftly and nimbly, but facing Dragon Mother and Dragon Mother's dual swords, she was forced to retreat step by step. She couldn't hold on any longer. The fatty beside her saw her predicament and wanted to stop her, but he was entangled by the Rock Tribe's giant axe, so he couldn't afford to be distracted. What infuriated Fatty was that the muscular rock race's demonic marks seemed to be his nemesis. Fatty grabbed the muscular rock race's arm a few times and pulled it into his body, trying to devour it. However, the feeling of digestion coming from his stomach was like sand. The muscular rock race's arm was covered with a layer of extremely hard powder. Although it was powder, it was even harder to digest than gold powder. Fatty couldn't do anything about it. Besides, the muscular rock race's skin was extremely hard, as if it had been petrified. Even when Fatty occasionally cut his skin with his sword, it didn't leave a single mark. Fortunately, Fatty could tell that the muscular rock race's other warriors didn't intend to attack with their full strength. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lasted this long. After all, there were only 5 of them, and they had to stay close to the divine coffin and protect their big brother. However, it was also because they stayed close to the divine coffin that the muscular rock race's other warriors were worried. They were worried that they would launch a desperate counterattack and destroy the divine coffin along with the immortal's corpse. Although the divine coffin was made of metal, it was as fragile as a piece of paper in front of an inner desolate level expert. They could break it with a single punch. If Fatty and the others really wanted to destroy the immortal's corpse inside, they would only need a few punches. Chee! Suddenly, a scream of pain rang out. Fatty and the others felt their hearts skip a beat. They hurriedly looked over and saw a horrifying scene. The graceful woman's arm had been chopped off by Dragon Mother. Her blood was everywhere. Retreat. Dragon Mother didn't dare to attack anymore. Seeing that they had won, the others immediately retreated. Third sister, are you okay? Seeing that Dragon Mother and the others had retreated, the others hurriedly surrounded them. The graceful woman shook her head slightly. She immediately released her demon body to recover her strength. The pain from her severed arm made her grimace. However, she didn't want the others to worry. She resisted the pain and shook her head. I'm fine. Luckily, they retreated. Otherwise, I would have been in real danger. Fatty looked at her pale face, and his eyes were full of pity. He said, hurry up and apply the medicine. They will attack again in a while. Put this arm away for now. We can reattach it when we get back, the muscular man said. Those bastards are planning to wear us out and then kill us all in one go. Sixth brother, who looked like a handsome young man, gritted his teeth and said, they had the chance to kill third sister just now. However, they were afraid that we would destroy the immortal's corpse out of anger, so they didn't do it. Those bastards are so king cunning. Stop talking. Hurry up and rest. No matter what, we have to stall until Big Brother wakes up, Fatty said. The others stopped complaining. They sat down, applied the medicine, and rested. Time passed quickly. Half an hour later, Dragon Mother and the muscular rock race's group attacked again. Fatty, the graceful woman, and the others hurried to stand up. Their faces were pale. They activated their demon bodies and prepared to fight. Give us the divine coffin, and we will spare your lives, Dragon Mother said coldly while flying in the air. Fatty spat and said coldly, you have said this many times. You may not be tired of it, but I am. Do you really think we are stupid enough to believe your bullshit? Humph, you are still trying to be brave when you are about to die. The muscular rock race's man landed on the ground like a giant rock. With a loud rumble, he turned into a sturdy stone man and walked towards Fatty's group step by step. Wait, Dragon Mother suddenly shouted. The muscular rock race's man frowned slightly and looked up at her. Dragon Mother gazed at the divine coffin behind Fatty's group. The hunchbacked old man slowly opened his eyes and tilted his head to look at her. The moment their eyes met, Dragon Mother's expression changed slightly. She said immediately, come back first. The muscular rock race's man was startled. He suddenly sensed something and looked up. Instantly, he saw the old man on the divine coffin looking down at him. His heart skipped a beat, and he stopped walking. Big brother, you are finally awake. Squeak, 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 great. Big Brother is awake. Fatty, the graceful woman, and the others also noticed that the hunchbacked old man had woken up. They were overjoyed, especially the graceful woman. Tears of joy welled up in her eyes. It wasn't that she was weak, it was just that the current situation was too hopeless for her. Little 3, the hunchbacked old man squinted his eyes when he saw the graceful woman's severed arm. He slowly stood up and said, thank you for your hard work. You can leave now. Big Brother, you have to be careful. Even though they are at the inner Baron level, they are very tricky to deal with. Fatty hurried to remind the old man. Don't worry. The hunchbacked old man looked at Dragon Mother and the others quietly. The reason why a ruler is called a ruler is that he can control everyone under the ruler level. Ruler, Dragon Mother, and the muscular rock races group widened their eyes when they heard the hunchbacked old man's words. Their faces were filled with astonishment and disbelief. This old man is a ruler. Not good. Inform Her Highness Yulida and ask Carter and the others to come here. Dragon Mother reacted almost instantly and shouted in a hurry. Behind the crowd, a pioneer who was climbing on the cliff had a pale face. He quickly climbed up the cliff and ran out of the valley to spread the news. A ruler. The muscular rock race's face was pale. He slowly retreated. He didn't expect that there was a ruler among the 6 of them. When the hunchbacked old man came out from the palace, he didn't attack because he was poisoned. The heat intensity of his body wasn't high either. That was why they all thought that he was just an inner Baron level warrior. They didn't expect him to be a ruler. Big brother, kill all these bastards, especially that black-winged bitch. She cut off third sister's arm. The muscular man and the handsome young man shouted. The hunchbacked old man squinted his eyes and locked on a Dragon Mother. Black liquid flowed out of his body and covered his entire body as if it was alive. He had entered the demon body mode. Seeing the killing intent in his eyes, Dragon Mother's cold and elegant face slightly changed. She said immediately, "Retreat. Fight outside. Don't hurt the immortal's body." The others retreated immediately. The muscular rock race's man who jumped down first turned around and retreated. Suddenly, he felt as if his back was stabbed by 2 sharp swords. A chill ran down his spine. He shrank his body and drilled into the ground. You guys protect the divine casket. Seeing the muscular rock race's man drilling into the ground, the hunchbacked old man frowned and said to Fatty and the others, "Leave the divine casket to us." "Big brother, be careful," Fatty shouted. The stooped old man didn't say a word. He leaped off the divine coffin and landed on the ground, then slightly bent his knees and leaped out. The ground cracked and collapsed. Swish! His body darted towards Dragon Mother and the others like a cannonball. With one leap, he leaped onto the valley, which was over 200 meters high, and created a hole on the cliff wall. He pressed his palm on the cliff wall and leaped back onto the valley. Looking at Dragon Mother and the others in front of him, his dark golden pupils shone with a bloodthirsty light. Swish! He leaped out again. His demon body didn't change much. He looked like an upright human-shaped lizard. Except for a tail and scales on his back, he didn't have any other strange limbs. When he dashed out, the ground was stirred up like a hurricane. Dragon Mother, who bore the brunt of his attack, changed her look dramatically. She flapped her wings and immediately rose to over 100 meters high. At the same time, shrill screams came from the ground. The other pioneers didn't have the time to run. When the hunchbacked old man's shadow approached them, their bodies exploded into blood mists. Dominator, Dragon Mother looked at the common pioneers and outer wilderness pioneers who died one after another on the ground. Her face darkened. Many of them were powerful members of her dragon tribe, but they were like puppets in front of the hunchbacked old man, unable to fight back at all. Even their movements of running away seemed to be extremely slow. In the territory of the rock race, in a building that looked like a church, Buckingham was sitting on the desk in his study, reviewing the applications from different regions. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. Without raising his head, he said, "Come in." The door was pushed open, and a servant walked in with a tea set in his hand. "Please have some tea." The servant handed the tea set to Buckingham. Buckingham woke up from his thoughts. He frowned and said, "When did I?" Before he finished his words, he sensed something strange. The temperature in the room seemed to have dropped, and a faint cold air was emitted from the servant in front of him. Buckingham's eyes sharpened, revealing a murderous intent. He said, "You are Swoosh. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."